Chapter 12:21. Ling Han endured the heavenly tribulation, tempering his true self in the heavenly lightning, and increasing his comprehension of the great Tao. Heavenly tribulation represented the strongest killing intent of the great Tao of heaven and earth. If he could comprehend such a great Tao, it would greatly increase his battle prowess. Ling Han was comprehending his own Tao. He had already grasped the embryonic form of the lightning sword technique, but this name did not live up to its name. It was only because this sword technique possessed the characteristics of speed and great destructive power that he named it the lightning sword technique. If it could also fuse with the power of heavenly lightning, then the lightning sword technique would live up to its name. How fast was heavenly lightning? What if it could also possess such characteristics? Though Ling Han had turned into dust, his divine sense was still stable. Under the tempering of the indestructible heaven scroll, his divine sense was incredibly tough. Even if it left his body and turned into a ball of light, it would not be damaged by the heavenly tribulation. The strength of his divine sense had actually reached the level above the low extreme of the sun-moon tier, and below the medium extreme. Thus, the power of lightning at the early stage of the sun-moon tier naturally could not hurt him. In the heavenly tribulation, he could better comprehend the power of lightning and directly understand its essence. Unfortunately, the heavenly tribulation comes too rarely, and it doesn't last long enough. Ling Han thought, but he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. I can only endure a few heavenly tribulations by myself, but can I use the heavenly tribulation of others to endure it? If I can grasp the technique of lightning, then whether it is the might of my sword technique or my movement technique, they will all be greatly improved. Half a day later, the sky full of thunderclouds dissipated, and Ling Han channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid. His body immediately recovered, and he also felt an obvious change in his body. Sun-moon tier. His power was at least 1,000,000 times stronger than before he had endured the heavenly tribulation. As expected, this is a huge threshold. After crossing it, my power that could surpass 10 stars is now only 6 stars. If I want to regain the power of surpassing 10 stars, I must cultivate to the pinnacle level of the sun-moon tier. However, only those who have cultivated to the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier can have the power of 6 stars before the pinnacle level of the sun-moon tier. Furthermore, they have to reach the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. If it's an ordinary mountain river tier cultivator, they can at most possess a power surpassing 4 stars. Only by cultivating to the pinnacle level would they be able to surpass 4 stars, and their achievements in the pinnacle level would also range from 4 stars to 6 stars in power. My current power is comparable to the late stage of the medium extreme of the sun-moon tier. However, this is only power. In terms of my grasp of the regulations of heaven and earth, I'm still at the early stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier. Thus, even if I use some secret techniques, my battle prowess will only surpass 6 or 7 stars. Therefore, people say that 5-star geniuses only exist in legends. Although this is a bit exaggerated, it is actually very reasonable because there are too few people who have reached the pinnacle state. Ling Han was startled and said, "Small tower, why hasn't the black tower changed?" He had broken through a major tier, so why hadn't the black tower opened up a new layer so that all 5 elements were present? You still have to rise another tier. It was rare for small tower to give a clear boundary. What? Ling Han almost jumped in fright. I have to reach the heavenly body tier to open the 5th level? Doesn't that mean that I can only open the 7th level when I reach the Genesis tier? Wrong. If you reach the Genesis tier, you can only open the 6th level, Small Tower said seriously. Ling Han was stunned. Then there are still 3 levels, and they can only be opened at the level of the celestial realm. Small Tower swayed back and forth. This was its nod. So, you have to cultivate as soon as possible. When the black tower is completely opened, I can also recover all my memories. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, "In that case, your memories haven't been destroyed, but rather sealed." "Perhaps," Small Tower said calmly. Small Tower said calmly, "Young man, work hard on your cultivation and think about it. If you make another breakthrough above the Genesis tier, you will be able to enter into the celestial realm, and in my vague memories, the people in the celestial realm should all have eternal life.
What?
Ling Han was shocked. The elites of the celestial realm actually had an unlimited lifespan? Then how powerful would this celestial realm be? Elites could continue to cultivate like this for billions, billions, trillions of years, becoming stronger and stronger. No wonder there was a precious treasure like the reincarnation tree. Even Genesis tiers couldn't wait for 12 trillion years, but the elites of the celestial realm could. However, you don't have to be discouraged. Though the elites of the celestial realm have an unlimited lifespan, they still have heaven's decline. If they can't survive it, they will still be killed, Small Tower said calmly. Unlimited lifespan doesn't mean eternal indestructibility. Ling Han nodded. The original owner of the Black Tower should be an elite of the celestial realm, but didn't he still die? Young man, run towards the morning sun. Small Tower said. Ling Han was speechless. He discovered that this tool spirit was becoming more and more black-bellied. He returned to the small town. Since he had already passed the heavenly tribulation and advanced into the sun-moon tier, he should also set off for the cloud apex planet. However, Feng Peyun and the others broke through one after another, so Ling Han could only slow down and set off after this tide of breakthrough passed. Feng Peyun and Mu Rongqing both advanced into the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, while Helian Tianyun was one level ahead, advancing into the high extreme, and Ding Ping was the most exaggerated, reaching the consummate level. If word of this got out, it would definitely scare people to death. It had only been a few short years, so how could there be such a frightening rate of improvement? But it should be known that with Ling Han's endless supply of alchemical pills to increase the accumulation of origin power, and with the reincarnation tree to comprehend Tao, if they still could not achieve such astonishing advancement, then would Feng Peyun and the others still have the right to be called prodigies? Ling Han did not remain idle, either. When they passed the heavenly tribulation, Ling Han would freeload along. For others, this was practically seeking death. Of all things, he actually freeloaded on the heavenly tribulation. But for Ling Han, he no longer needed to shatter his godly bones to temper himself. He only needed to observe the power of the heavenly tribulation, so he naturally did not need to suffer at all. He only needed to quietly study. After passing the 4 heavenly tribulations, Ling Han cultivated in seclusion under the reincarnation tree for 3 days. When he opened his eyes, there was actually a flash of lightning. Compared to the lightning technique that I have grasped now, the thunderclap 9th heaven is practically trash. Ling Han shook his head. After all, the thunderclap 9th heaven was only the lowest level cultivation technique of the immortal realm, but the heavenly tribulation was derived from the great Tao of heaven and earth, so how could it compare? As my cultivation level becomes higher and higher, the heavenly tribulation that I pass will naturally become more and more powerful. Then, the power of lightning that I have grasped will also become stronger and stronger. With heaven and earth as my teacher, I will create my own Tao. Ling Han's gaze was determined. The path that he wanted to walk was becoming clearer and clearer. Since everyone had passed the heavenly tribulation, it was impossible for them to break through again in a short period of time, so Ling Han decided to set out. However, he had not set out yet, and unexpectedly encountered someone who was seeing him off. Empress Luanxing. It was not a clone, but rather her main body. "You're leaving?" she asked. Her beautiful face was shrouded in primal chaos, and her tone was calm. There was not the slightest fluctuation in her voice. Being strong enough to reach the heavenly body tier, she naturally could control her emotions very well. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "At first, I wanted to go to Joint Peace Planet to say goodbye to you, but I did not think that you would come." Chapter 12:22. Empress Luanxing dispersed the aura of chaos on her face, revealing her peerless beauty that could wreak havoc in the world, especially her enchanting charm. Even Hunyou's beauty was not inferior to hers, but in terms of charm, she was far inferior. After all, Hunyou was still young, and her charm was not yet developed, so she might not lose to her in the future. But now, Empress Luanxing was definitely the #1 troublemaker, no one else. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This troublemaker was really never tired of it. Furthermore, when he was with her, he would naturally forget everyone else, and only her could be tolerated. This was the charm of an empress. "I want to ask you some things," she said solemnly. "Hee, why are you so serious with me?" Ling Han said with a smile, and his eyes glanced down slightly. "Are you being disobedient and want to be taught a lesson?" Empress Luanxing knew where he was staring at and couldn't help but feel embarrassed and annoyed. Although it wasn't her, the main body, who had been spanked, it was her divine sense that was in control, so she naturally felt the same. Now that Ling Han deliberately stared at her, she felt her face burn and couldn't help but blush. "Taking liberties with me, aren't you afraid that I will suppress you?" She humphed, fully displaying the domineering nature of an empress. Ling Han coughed, clasped his hands, and said, "Greetings, Empress." "Too insincere." Empress Luanxing casually raised a hand and said, "Forget it, I have something to ask you." After hearing her say this twice, Ling Han also became serious. Though this empress was extremely charming, it was clear that she was an extremely thin-skinned person. She would not be able to withstand any teasing at all. His relationship with her was not so good that it was as if they were deeply in love, so it was best to stop before going too far. "What do you want to ask?" he asked. "Celestial realm." Empress Luanxing said, her pretty face having a complicated expression. There was loneliness and anger. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, "Then enter the Black Tower and call Small Tower." Empress Luanxing couldn't help but pause. Entering the Black Tower, everything was under Ling Han's control. She had been spanked last time, and she still had lingering fears. Ling Han's face darkened and he said, "Am I that kind of vile person?" Empress Luanxing didn't reply, but her expression clearly said yes. Ling Han sat on the ground and said, "All right then. If you don't trust me, don't go in and cultivate in the future. This world belongs to me, and everyone belongs to me. Everything that belongs to you belongs to me. It's just that I'm allowing you to possess them," Empress Luanxing said proudly. "So, don't be mistaken." Looking at her proud appearance, Ling Han couldn't help but feel an itch in his heart. This gave him an incomparably strong desire to conquer her. The charm of this stunner seemed to have increased a little. Ling Han resisted the urge and said, "Forget it, let's not talk about this. Are you related to the immortal region?" Empress Luanxing hesitated slightly before saying, "My ancestors came from the celestial realm." "What?" Ling Han was shocked. He suddenly clapped his hands and said, "I know. Ancient divine tribes, are they all from the celestial realm?" Empress Luanxing nodded. "That's right. The ancient divine tribes were all exiled from the celestial realm to the immortal realm. Because they have the bloodline of the celestial realm, they are relatively stronger." Ling Han looked at Empress Luanxing in surprise. He had just mentioned the celestial realm, and now a descendant of the celestial realm came out. He said solemnly, "You said exiled?" "The exact year can't be determined. There was a war in the celestial realm that affected the whole celestial realm. In that war, many elites died, and after the war ended, the losing side was all exiled from the celestial realm," Empress Luanxing said. Ling Han's heart thumped. This was definitely a shocking secret. "Then do you want to return to the celestial realm?" he asked. Empress Luanxing nodded slowly. Returning to the celestial realm is the belief of the 9-snake tribe, passed down from generation to generation. She looked at Ling Han and continued, "That little girl should be the successor of some great sect in the celestial realm." She was referring to Tigress. "Rock Palace," Ling Han said. "It has been too long, and only bits and pieces of the tribe's records about the celestial realm are left." Empress Luanxing sighed. "In the ancestral land of the 9-snake tribe, there is a 9-snake pool. Every disciple of the 9-snake tribe needs to bathe in it to fully activate their bloodline. For the 9-snake tribe, this is the most important inheritance. So, the most important reason for you to return to the celestial realm is to retrieve the 9-snake pool?" Ling Han asked. "I can't." Empress Luanxing shook her head. "The 9-snake pool is formed from the remains of the ancestor of the 9-snake tribe, and the remains of the ancestor are buried in the ancestral land. They have already become one with the mountains and cannot be moved. So, if the Nine-Snake tribe wants to regain its glory, they can only return to the ancestral land, Ling Han said. A desolate expression appeared on Empress Luanxing's face. However, I am the only one left of the Nine-Snake tribe now. Don't worry. Ling Han reached out to place a hand on Empress Luanxing's shoulder. In the future, we will have many children and strengthen the Nine-Snake tribe. Pa! His hand was sent flying by Empress Luanxing before he could even touch her. He gritted his teeth in pain. This empress was at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, and a casual slap from her was enough to break his bones. Don't be so talkative, Empress Luanxing chided. Ling Han snickered. If it had been any other man who dared to tease the empress like this, he would probably have been reduced to ashes by now. However, only his hand had been sent flying, which meant that he was still in the empress's heart. She had fought with an eternal river tier elite for his sake previously. Sharp tongue, soft heart, I like it. Ling Han nodded and solemnly said, we will charge into the celestial realm together. Empress Luanxing pondered for a moment, and then said, I don't know what you want to do, but be careful on your journey. Don't worry, I will definitely return safe and sound, Ling Han said. The celestial realm, what kind of place is that? In the legendary celestial realm, elites can possess eternal lifespan, Empress Luanxing said. Eternal existence. Once conflict arises, it is indeed impossible to resolve. Ling Han thought. These people had lived for too long, so they would naturally have nothing better to do after eating their fill, and would think of all sorts of nonsense. Moreover, generation after generation of old people could not die, so conflicts would only intensify and ultimately develop into war. Then, since a war had erupted, there could possibly be a second and third war. The celestial realm was not necessarily a celestial realm. Don't worry about your great Ling Empire, I will guard it for you, Empress Luanxing continued. Then, with a wave of her sleeves, she said, I am leaving. Wait, Ling Han called out. Empress Luanxing stopped and turned around, a questioning look on her face. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, this farewell will definitely be many years later before we can meet again. Won't you give me a hug? Empress Luanxing instantly rolled her eyes at him, and the aura of primal chaos enveloped her beautiful face again. She spat out a single word, scram. Chapter 12:24. After knowing the exact location of the 5 sects, Ling Han and the others immediately set off. After half a month, Ling Han had gained new insights on the refinement of the spiritual rainbow developing pill. He didn't start refining it, but meditated to make up for his shortcomings. He believed that if he started the furnace again, not only would he be able to guarantee success, but he would also improve greatly. They entered the territory of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire, traveled for another 5 days, and arrived at the Qixia Mountain where the Cloud Phoenix sect was located. This was naturally to find the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden first, and then figure out how to overthrow the 5 sects. Though the actions of the 5 sects were definitely not allowed in the immortal realm, the lower realm had already opened the sky and arrived in the immortal realm, so there was naturally no evidence. How could they prove that the 5 sects had once refined the living beings of a small world into alchemical pills? Therefore, Ling Han naturally would not take the path of complaining. Instead, he would use his own hands to overthrow the 5 sects. This was even more satisfying. I wonder what is the cultivation of Sword Emperor and setting Sun Saber Emperor. Ling Han said in his heart. This was an existence that he could only look up to in the past, but in the immortal realm, even the Sword Emperor and the others might not be qualified to be called geniuses. Perhaps they would still be able to maintain their astonishing talent in the immortal world and dazzle the world. He suppressed his competitive heart and came to a small town at the foot of Qixia Mountain. This small town was built on the Cloud Phoenix sect, and there were martial artists everywhere. Some of them were here to acknowledge a master, some were here to entrust the Cloud Phoenix sect with some matters, to solve some problems that they could not solve themselves, some were here to pay a visit, and some were here to do business. In short, Whether a faction was prosperous or not could be determined by the development and liveliness of its affiliated towns. If it was so deserted that no one visited it, then the faction would naturally not be strong. According to this, the Cloud Phoenix sect was still living quite comfortably. Ling Han and his brothers, as well as Ding Ping and Helian Tianyun, stayed here for a few days, discreetly asking around, but to their disappointment, there was no news of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's whereabouts. Not only was there no news of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's whereabouts, even the Sword Emperor, the Setting Sun Saber Emperor, and the others had no clues. Yes. Ling Han clapped his hands. The Sword Emperor and the Setting Sun Saber Emperor lived up to their names in the small world, but would they still dare to call themselves that in the immortal realm? If you call yourself the Emperor, where does that put the Crimson Flames Emperor? In that case, they must have changed their nickname. Ling Han naturally knew of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's name, but this name was extremely strange. Back then, in order to find out about this name, he had even used the excuse of helping her concoct alchemical pills to half-joke and half-coerce the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. It was also after that time that he was targeted by the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and it seemed like he had greatly offended her. Moreover, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had also warned him that he definitely couldn't reveal her name to anyone else. Then how do we find them? Ling Han was in a dilemma. After thinking for a while, he decided to find 4 disciples first. In his mind, when the 5 sects descended 10,000 years ago, it should have been the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden who had brought his 4 disciples to the immortal realm. Then, as long as he found his 4 disciples, he would naturally be able to find out where the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was now. Let's do that. Thus, he decided to inquire about the whereabouts of Jiang Yufeng, Chen Ruijing, Yun Yong Wang, and Kong Xiuyuan. Soon, he obtained some information. Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiuyuan were quite famous now, and they were the 2 management alchemists of the Han Lin Pavilion. Han Lin Pavilion, flipping the 2 words Han Lin, wasn't it Ling Han? Come, let's go to Big Trade City. The Han Lin Pavilion was located in Big Trade City, and Big Trade City was only a 2-day journey from Qixia Mountain. It was also the nearest large city to the Cloud Phoenix sect. They arrived very quickly, and found out after making some inquiries. This Han Lin Pavilion had only risen to prominence a few thousand years ago, but it was developing better and better recently. The 2 management alchemists had both broken through to level 5, and their natural talent was very shocking. Being able to break through to level 5 meant that their martial art tier had to have reached the Sun Moon tier as well. Otherwise, the power of their divine sense would not be enough to support the refinement of level 5 divine pills. Apart from a very few special cases, their divine sense was incredibly powerful. Ling Han nodded internally. The improvement of his 2 disciples was quite impressive. Because they specialized in alchemy, they could still advance from the Shattering Void tier to the Sun Moon tier in 10,000 years. This improvement was very shocking, as expected of his disciples. Because this also involved his last life, Ling Han had Feng Piyun buy a courtyard in the city to stay. Then, they could go their separate ways, training while gathering information about the 5 sects. To them, the 5 sects were still colossal entities. Furthermore, this was an imperial empire, and there were extremely many heavenly body tier elites. Even eternal river tiers were counted in the 10s or even 100s. Who knew if the 5 sects had a powerful backer? Revenge was a must, but he definitely could not throw his life away as well. Ling Han walked slowly. This big trade city was also a city where humans and demonic beasts lived next to each other, giving him an urge to capture the demonic beasts that were walking beside him and make them into a delicious feast. He secretly cursed at his sins. A glutton's nature was hard to change. After a while, he arrived at the Han Lin Pavilion. So many people. At the entrance, there were 3 layers of people inside and 3 layers of people outside, so that not even water could pass through. Ling Han couldn't help but feel strange. This business was too good, wasn't it? Buying an alchemical pill was crowded to this extent. He heard the discussions of the people beside him, and finally realized that it wasn't that the Han Lin Pavilion's business was so good, but rather that someone was challenging them. The other party was an alchemist from the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and said that he wanted to spar with the Han Lin Pavilion in Alchemy. That was what they said, but everyone was very clear that the Treasure Forest Pavilion was here to cause trouble and suppress the Han Lin Pavilion's momentum. That was because the Treasure Forest Pavilion was originally the largest alchemical merchant in Big Trade City, but now the Han Lin Pavilion was rising strongly. Though it was far from threatening the position of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, there were signs of it. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was a colossal entity, and the Treasure Forest Pavilion in Big Trade City was only a branch. It was said that this alchemical merchant was spread throughout the entire Imperial Empire and controlled astonishing wealth and power. Even the Crimson Flames Emperor had to give them some respect. Thus, now that an alchemist from the Treasure Forest Pavilion had come to cause trouble, naturally no one was good for the Han Lin Pavilion. Lost again. A cry of surprise came from the front of the crowd. Everyone shook their heads. As it turned out, the Han Lin Pavilion had already lost 4 matches in a row. Ling Han squeezed his way forward. What kind of power was he now? He only needed to circulate his Sun-Moon tier power slightly, and he easily squeezed his way to the front. This was already the interior of the Han Lin Pavilion, and there was a very large space in the center. There were 2 pill furnaces placed there, and the people from both sides were clearly standing behind 1 pill furnace each. Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiao Yuan. Ling Han immediately discovered his 2 disciples. 10,000 years had passed, yet their appearances hadn't changed much. They only appeared calmer and more mature. Heh, we've competed for half a month, and you've also lost 4 matches in a row. It'll be the same even if we compete for a 5th match, an elder in his 60s said with a faint smile. He appeared to be brimming with confidence. In the past half a month, the Treasure Forest Pavilion had won completely in terms of refining level 1 divine pills all the way to level 4 divine pills. Not necessarily. Yun Yong Wang humphed. He then turned to Kong Xiao Yuan and said, "Third, you or me?" Kong Xiao Yuan stepped forward. Chapter 12:25. Although the Han Lin Pavilion had already lost 4 matches in a row, it was like a sect competing in martial arts. The 4 Mountain River tier cultivators could lose all their matches, but the Sun Moon tier cultivators could win 1 match. It was the same for alchemy. The Han Lin Pavilion had 2 level 5 alchemists. Thus, if they wanted to completely suppress the Han Lin Pavilion, they had to defeat these 2 level 5 alchemists. Of course, their previous victories weren't in vain. It proved that the Treasure Forest Pavilion was superior to the Han Lin Pavilion in terms of level 1 to level 4 alchemists. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was indeed quite ruthless. They wanted to deal a heavy blow to the entire Han Lin Pavilion. Thus, if people wanted to purchase alchemical pills, they would definitely consider the Treasure Forest Pavilion first. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, the quality of their pills was higher. Every pill was 30% poisonous. One couldn't eat too many pills. Thus, when the quantity was limited, they would definitely choose the higher quality pills. Thus, as long as the Treasure Forest Pavilion defeated the 2 level 5 alchemists of the Han Lin Pavilion, the Treasure Forest Pavilion would naturally win this match. Moreover, this match was being held in public and it had been going on for half a month. Who in the city didn't know about this? Kong Xiao Yuan walked down and asked, "Who wants to compete with me?" "I'll go." A middle-aged man walked out. His appearance wasn't very impressive, but his body exuded a strong medicinal scent. This was the result of working with alchemical pills and medicinal ingredients for many years. "Liang Jinbo," Kong Xiao Yuan said in a deep voice. "Heh, you recognize me?" the middle-aged man asked. Kong Xiao Yuan chuckled and said, "I've long heard of Grandmaster Liang's great name. I heard that Grandmaster Liang was already a level 5 alchemist 100,000 years ago. You're probably not far from level 6 now, right?" Liang Jinbo revealed a proud expression. Alchemy was just like martial art. Every step forward was incredibly difficult. Even though he had already been a level 5 alchemist 100,000 years ago, he was still at this cultivation level now. One had to know how long it took to advance from the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier to the medium extreme. Those with better talent would need 400,000 to 500,000 years. Thus, he only needed 100,000 years to become a level 6 alchemist. This was actually very, very impressive. He was completely worthy of being called a prodigy. Kang Xiaoyuan, you're also a prodigy of alchemy. Why don't you take the Hanlin Pavilion and join our Treasure Forest Pavilion? Liang Jinbo offered. Kang Xiaoyuan shook his head and said, the Hanlin Pavilion is the blood, sweat, and tears of us brothers. We definitely won't let it collapse. Then I have nothing to say. Liang Jinbo extended his hand. Let's compete. Please. Liang Jinbo paused for a moment, then said, since it's my side who is challenging you, and I'm older than you by many years, so I can be considered half a senior, then let me decide what pill to refine first. There was a huge difference because even though they were both fifth-tier medicinal pills, there was still a difference in difficulty. Those who chose first would be at a disadvantage, while those who chose later could calmly make adjustments according to their own strength. Kang Xiaoyuan didn't try to show off. It was true that the other party had more than 100,000 years of experience in alchemy than him, so he didn't have much of an advantage. I'll concoct the 4 directions elixir, Liang Jinbo said in a deep voice after some consideration. Kang Xiaoyuan was slightly astonished. The 4 directions elixir was one of the more difficult pills to refine even among level 5 pills. Thus, if he wanted to defeat his opponent, he would definitely have to choose a more difficult pill. Of course, he could also choose an easier pill, and then hope that Liang Jinbo would make a mistake and explode. Then, he would only need to concoct a level 5 pill to win. But if Ling Han wasn't confident, why would he say that he wanted to concoct the 4 directions elixir at a time like this? He pondered for a moment and then said, then I'll concoct the 4 directions elixir as well. Both of them were concocting the 4 directions elixir, so the competition was even simpler. Whoever could concoct more pills in a cauldron would naturally be the winner. Moreover, if the number of pills was the same, they could also compare the quality of the pills. Then let's begin. Both of them first prepared their materials. The Treasure Forest Pavilion had come prepared, so they naturally had brought their materials with them. Moreover, Kang Xiaoyuan was the owner of this place, so he naturally chose his materials very quickly. After a short while, the two of them said to begin, and then began to concoct pills. They sorted out and refined the materials, and then started a fire. Soon, the two of them entered the most crucial stage of concoction. Ling Han only pondered for a moment, and then shook his head. With his eyesight as the alchemy emperor, he could already tell that Kang Xiaoyuan was no match for Liang Jinbo. Kang Xiaoyuan's talent in alchemy was indeed not inferior to Ling Han's. In fact, it was even superior. Unfortunately, Ling Han had been a level 5 alchemist for 100,000 years more than him. This was a very, very large gap. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, and he walked towards Yun Yong Wang. Stop! The members of the Han Lin Pavilion hurriedly blocked a young man's path upon seeing him walk over so boldly. Yun Yong Wang also walked over upon hearing this. After meeting Ling Han's eyes, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise and say, have we met before? This person's eyes gave him a sense of déjà vu. Moreover, there were far too many complicated emotions contained in his eyes. Ling Han lowered his gaze slightly and said with a smile, I want to join the Han Lin Pavilion. Is that okay? Yun Yong Wang was astonished. This young man actually wanted to join the Han Lin Pavilion. Didn't he see that the Han Lin Pavilion was in a very bad situation right now? Yet he actually wanted to join. Strange. He asked, you're also an alchemist? Ling Han broke into a smile and replied, I've studied for a few years. Only a few years? Yun Yong Wang pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, all right. A person's heart was revealed in times of crisis. Ling Han actually wanted to join the Han Lin Pavilion at this time. It was like sending charcoal in snowy weather, and it made him feel very comfortable. Thus, no matter how strong Ling Han's alchemy skills were, he accepted this kind gesture. Young man, how should I address you? He asked again. Ling Han. What? Yun Yong Wang exclaimed in shock, and almost jumped up. This person actually had the same name as his deceased master. Before this, he had already felt that Ling Han was very familiar, and now with this name, his heart couldn't help but tremble. Unfortunately, no matter how he looked, he couldn't find any similarities between this Ling Han and his master. Moreover, before he had gone to the immortal realm, his master had already disappeared for several hundred years, so he should have indeed died. It's just a coincidence, he thought. Ling Han, where are you from? Yun Yong Wang couldn't help but ask. Joint Peace Planet, Ling Han answered. He didn't directly reveal his identity. Firstly, there were many eyes and ears here. If he revealed that he was from the lower realm, it was extremely likely that the 5 sects would find out, and they would target him in advance. Secondly, 10,000 years had already passed, so he didn't know whether these disciples of his had changed or not. This change referred to the bottom line of good and evil. He had to observe them first. Yun Yong Wang was slightly at a loss. The immortal realm was too big, and unless one was a businessman, the majority of people would stay on the same planet for their entire lives. Moreover, the Joint Peace Planet was 200 years away from this planet at normal travel speed, so it was normal that he hadn't heard of it. Oh. He nodded, a sliver of disappointment appearing on his face. However, he felt more at ease and focused on the competition between Liang Jinbo and Kong Xiaoyuan. This was related to the Han Lin Pavilion's future. Chapter 12:26. Ling Han didn't mind. Hadn't he joined the Han Lin Pavilion so that he could replace Kong Xiaoyuan after he lost? With the Alchemy Emperor around, how could he lose? Moreover, the refinement of a level 5 divine pill would take about 10 days. Thus, Ling Han left to find Feng Peyun and the others. He couldn't waste any time. Moreover, he had to think about how he was going to explain his other identity to them. He decided to take it slow and explain it to Kong Xiaoyuan and the others after he acknowledged them. 8 days later, Ling Han returned to the Han Lin Pavilion. The competition between Kong Xiaoyuan and Liang Jinbo was nearing its end. However, once pill refinement began, completing 1% was the same as completing 99%. There couldn't be any distractions or mistakes. Otherwise, all of their efforts would be wasted. Thus, they became even more solemn at this time. Half a day later, the two of them stopped almost at the same time. Open! Both of them slapped the lid of their cauldrons. They were about to open their cauldrons. However, Kong Xiaoyuan tapped the cauldron repeatedly with his hands, causing the flames to jump rapidly a few times. This was the 3-fire guide, Ling Han's innovation in alchemy. Liang Jinbo displayed his cauldron to everyone first. There were 3 round pills inside, and they were about to fly out of the cauldron when he forcefully suppressed them and sealed them in the cauldron. Kong Xiaoyuan tilted his cauldron slightly and said, "I didn't disappoint you, Brother Liang." Astonishingly, there were also 3 pills in his pill furnace. However, Kong Xiaoyuan secretly wiped his forehead. If it weren't for the fact that he had mastered the 3-fire guide and improved the quality and success rate of the pills at the last moment, he would only be able to refine 2 pills in this cauldron. He could only secretly hope that his opponent could also refine 3 pills. Otherwise, he would definitely lose. Then let's compare the quality. The two of them took out their pills, poured them into their palms, and placed them together. For alchemists like them, they only needed to look and smell to determine the quality of a pill. Kong Xiaoyuan's expression quickly changed. Whether it was in terms of color or smell, his opponent's quality was superior to his, and it wasn't just by a little. There was a clear disparity. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end he sighed and said, "I lost." Haha. Liang Jinbo roared with laughter. The Han Lin Pavilion had suffered a crushing defeat in this spar. As the main force of this match, he was naturally extremely delighted. "Don't be disappointed," Ling Han suddenly said. "He's stronger than you because he became a level 5 alchemist long ago. He's been cultivating for tens of thousands of years longer than you. If you train for a few more years, it won't be difficult for you to surpass him." Kong Xiaoyuan was startled, and he walked toward Ling Han with a confused expression. Who is this guy? Why was he acting like an old man? His tone made him sound like he was his master. Previously, he had been concentrating on concocting pills, and wouldn't know even if the sky collapsed. Thus, he naturally didn't know who Ling Han was, nor did he know that Ling Han was now a member of the Han Lin Pavilion. But Liang Jinbo was furious. What was the meaning of this? A loss was a loss. Was this an excuse? He couldn't help but snort coldly, "Are you guys sore losers?" Lose? Ling Han laughed loudly, shook his head and said, "The spar isn't over yet, so how is this a loss?" Not over yet? Your strongest alchemist has already participated, so what else do you want? Hold on, who is this brat? Where did he come from? Liang Jinbo asked, "Who is this person?" "Brother Kong, Brother Yun. Since when did this person become the master of the Han Lin Pavilion?" Ling Han waved his hand and said, "I'm a newly hired alchemist of the Han Lin Pavilion. In the next match, I'll compete with you. Are there any level 6 or level 7 alchemists? Take them out for a spin." Take them out for a spin? Do you think alchemists are dogs? You actually dare to spar? This infuriated Liang Jinbo. There was a sinister look in his eyes, and he said, "Brother Kong, Brother Yun, how long do you plan to let this brat run wild?" Kong Xiaoyuan was just about to speak when he saw Ling Han walk over and snatch the 3 alchemical pills from his hand. Although his cultivation level was also at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, it was completely insufficient in front of Ling Han. If a tiger doesn't show its might, you'll think I'm a sick cat. Ling Han tossed the 3 alchemical pills back into the alchemy cauldron and then began to refine them. What? You've already refined the alchemical pills, and you're actually going to refine them again? Are you fucking retarded? To say nothing of alchemical pills, even forged tools weren't something that could be tossed into the fire to refine and refine if one wasn't satisfied. God tools contain the will of martial art. Carelessly refining them would only erase the will of martial art and destroy the God tool. It was the same for alchemical pills. However, the divine patterns within them were interwoven with the regulations of heaven and earth, and they were even more fragile. Why did one have to be so careful in every step of pill refinement? That was because the cauldron would be ruined if even one of the divine patterns was interwoven wrongly. Kong Xiaoyuan was just about to stop him, yet Yun Yong Wang pulled him back. He was filled with confusion and asked, "Why?" "His name is Ling Han," Yun Yong Wang said. "What?" Kong Xiaoyuan was stunned. However, he immediately shook his head. Ling Han definitely couldn't be their master. He had died over 10,000 years ago. However, because they had the same name, he also chose to let Ling Han fool around for once. Ling Han continued to refine the alchemical pills, and the flames burned fiercely. Soon, an astonishing medicinal fragrance wafted out, and it could be smelled in a radius of 5 kilometers. The cauldron actually didn't explode? Liang Jinbo was incredibly astonished. Level 5 divine pills contained a massive amount of energy. If they were refined by this kind of flame, it would be very easy for the balance within them to be disrupted. As a result, the terrifying energy would explode. In the best-case scenario, the cauldron would explode, and in the worst-case scenario, it would cause a massive explosion. This explosion was comparable to the full-power attack of 10 or even 100 elites at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. This was because this was a concentrated explosion of energy. It was like the ultimate arrow, and its might was far beyond one's cultivation level. However, even though Ling Han was fooling around, this cauldron of alchemical pills actually didn't explode. This was far too strange. It was practically unbelievable. Could it be that he didn't put the alchemical pills in at all? Ling Han's expression was extremely focused. He was trying to improve the quality of the alchemical pills. This was extremely difficult to achieve, even for an alchemy emperor like him. However, fortunately, this was only a level 5 divine pill. Meanwhile, his alchemy level had already reached level 7, so there was a chance that he could succeed. The difficulty was far too high, and it was no less than refining a cauldron of level 7 divine pills. Thus, even Ling Han had to be extremely careful. He extracted the divine patterns within the godly medicine, and they continuously intertwined as he made subtle adjustments. Improving the quality of the alchemical pills wasn't the same as refining them all over again. Thus, this process didn't take much time. After merely 2 hours, Ling Han stopped. The process of improving the quality of the alchemical pills had already been completed. He opened the cauldron, and retrieved the alchemical pills from within. He then tossed them toward Liang Jinbo and said, "Frog in a well, learn well." Liang Jinbo subconsciously caught them. His eyes swept over them, and an expression of disbelief instantly spread across his face. Chapter 12:28. Everyone's expression changed. This bet was too much. Everyone's expression changed. This bet was too much. Although the Treasure Forest Pavilion dared to bully the Han Lin Pavilion, that was only a matter of business, not a person. It was merely a business competition. If one's strength was inferior, there was nothing to say. But He Jingyun's wager was just humiliating him. If he really crawled out of this street, would Ling Han still be able to stay here? He would definitely have to leave this city dejectedly, never daring to set foot in this city again. Ling Han's expression also turned cold. He could ignore business competition, but He Jingyun was clearly targeting him now. "Humph, you're really seeking your own death. Are you sure you want to compete with the Alchemy Emperor?" "Fine." Ling Han agreed immediately. "You asked for it." "We're competing in refining level 6 divine pills," He Jingyun emphasized. His opponent's vitality was so strong that he probably wasn't even 1,000 years old, so he had at most been a level 6 alchemist for 1,000 years. It was only 1,000 years, so how many cauldrons of level 6 divine pills could he have refined? How much understanding could he have? However, he would never have imagined that Ling Han was not only the Alchemy Emperor, but also a reincarnation tree. Cultivating under the tree for a day was a year. Ling Han smiled and said, "Of course. Since you're a junior, I'll choose first. I'll refine the explosive thunder pill." In reality, he only knew one level 6 divine pill, and he would refine it regardless of whether it was first or second. Since that was the case, why not act cool for once? Sure enough, as soon as he acted tough, the surrounding people were all moved. As mentioned before, there was a huge difference between first and second. The second would have the initiative, and the choice would be greater. Explosive thunder pill. He Jingyun was slightly moved. This was an extremely difficult pill to refine even among level 6 divine pills. Moreover, it was an ancient recipe, and not many people had mastered it. However, he just so happened to be one of those who had mastered it. Then I'll also choose the explosive thunder pill," He Jingyun said confidently. Ling Han smirked coldly in his mind. The other party definitely didn't know that he had spent a lot of effort on the explosive thunder pill because there were pitifully few people who knew how to refine this kind of alchemical pill. Moreover, its effects were extraordinarily powerful, and it could raise the battle prowess of those in the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier by 2 stars. Its value was ridiculously high. Therefore, he would make a cauldron of pills every once in a while. Not only was he able to maintain a 100% success rate, but the quality of the pills had also greatly improved. Choose the explosive thunder pill to compete with him. To ask for it, then prepare the materials and prepare to begin, Alchemist Who said. Both sides were preparing their materials. However, a troubled expression immediately appeared on the Han Lin Pavilion's face. This was because they didn't have a level 6 alchemist, so they naturally wouldn't prepare level 6 materials. However, Ling Han smiled as he retrieved materials from the Black Tower. Yun Yong Wang and Kang Xiao Yuan were both touched and confused by his actions. Why did Ling Han help the Han Lin Pavilion so much? But at this moment, no matter how confused they were, it was impossible for them to push their only strong ally out of the door. After both sides had prepared their materials, they said, "Begin," to each other, and the competition began. Ling Han did this casually. He had already refined a few cauldrons of this explosive thunder pill. Moreover, he would summarize his experience under the reincarnation tree every time he refined it, and he would improve on his shortcomings. He was the Alchemy Emperor, and the reincarnation tree was nature-defying. Every time he meditated, his skill in refining the explosive thunder pill would improve greatly. Right now, he was extremely familiar with this process, and it was incredibly easy for him. In contrast, He Jingyun was extremely careful, and he didn't dare to get distracted at all. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, and he appeared to be incredibly nervous. With such a comparison, it was clear who had the upper hand. Unless that Ling Han is bluffing, he's definitely going to win this round with his calm demeanor. Didn't he Jingyun say that the loser would have to crawl out of this street? I'm already looking forward to it. A level 6 alchemist crawling out of the street isn't something that can be seen every day. Everyone couldn't help but whisper among themselves, thinking that Ling Han had a higher chance of winning. However, refining a cauldron of level 6 pills required about half a month's time. Even though Ling Han seemed to have the upper hand, the true outcome would only be decided after half a month. Thus, many people grew impatient and would naturally return to eat or sleep. They could wait for half a month before coming back to see the results. Time passed by silently, and half a month's time had already passed. Jingyun revealed an extremely haggard expression. He was refining a level 6 divine pill, and interweaving the divine patterns required an astonishing amount of mental and physical effort. Not only was his consciousness exhausted, but even his origin power was almost completely depleted. When refining this type of pill, alchemists usually had to consume pills as they refined to replenish their origin power. However, Jingyun was known as an alchemist prodigy, and he indeed had some skill. From start to finish, he hadn't consumed a single pill. This wasn't just arrogance. Rather, if he consumed pills, it was inevitable that he would be slightly distracted, which would affect the quality of the completed pill. It was naturally best for him to be able to work in one go. However, he was also about to become dry. After refining this cauldron of pills, he would have to rest for at least a month. However, compared to Ling Han's words, this was truly shocking. He was still calm, and there wasn't even a drop of sweat on his forehead. However, his eyes had become slightly brighter. Open! Jingyun slapped the cauldron forcefully. But the lid flew off, and 3 pills actually flew out on their own. It was as if they were trying to escape. Jingyun was already prepared, and with a grab of his right hand, the 3 pills landed in his palm. An expression of satisfaction appeared on his face. In the past, he could at most refine 2 pills in a single cauldron, but this time, he actually exceeded his standard and managed to refine 3 pills. I'm definitely going to win. Ling Han also slapped the cauldron. Shio shio shio. A few specks of light also flew out from the cauldron, but this was clearly more than 3 pills. 5 pills. Pooh. The alchemists of the Treasure Forest Pavilion immediately spluttered. Although none of them knew how to refine explosive thunder pills, this didn't prevent them from knowing that the highest number of explosive thunder pills refined in this cauldron was only 5 pills. In other words, Ling Han had reached a perfect condition. But all 5 pills landed in Ling Han's hand. He spread out his hand again, and 5 light blue pills were currently spinning in his palm. It was as if they were trying to break free from Ling Han's control and fly into the sky. Jingyun gritted his teeth, and his face alternated between red and green. He lost. He definitely wouldn't accept this. If he lost, he would have to crawl out of this street. How was he going to live in the future? He shouted, "The number of pills you refined is indeed higher than mine, but we still have to compare the quality of the pills. If the quality of your explosive thunder pills is only 1 or 2 stars, how can they compare to mine?" This wasn't unreasonable. However, if one had an advantage in the number of pills refined, it usually meant that one had an advantage in the quality of the pills refined. Thus, one would only compare the quality of the pills if they had the same number of pills. He was clearly just a sore loser. Ling Han smiled and said, "Then let's appraise them." Chapter 12:29. The results of the appraisal were quickly obtained. Alchemy and appraisal skills were 2 completely different things. Even level 1 alchemists, or even non-alchemists, could appraise alchemical pills very well. However, they needed to have a good understanding of alchemical pills. Ling Han had a complete victory. Jingyun's explosive thunder pill barely reached 6 stars, but Ling Han's was 9 stars. It wasn't perfect, but that was because Ling Han hadn't used the 3 fire guide at the end to prevent his 2 disciples from noticing. Jingyun was dazed. He had lost, and it was a complete defeat at that. The gap between them wasn't just a little bit. "Please," Ling Han said with a smile. If he lost, he would have to crawl the streets. Jingyun humphed and turned to leave. He was too ashamed to stay here. Hey, use 4 legs, not 2, Ling Han said. He Jingyun turned around and proudly said, "You want me, a level 6 alchemist, to crawl?" He hadn't even finished speaking when he was picked up by Ling Han. He tried to kick him, but he couldn't break free no matter what. He was stunned. One had to realize that he was also at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, which was equivalent to Ling Han's cultivation level. Why couldn't he resist at all? I hate people who don't keep their promises the most. Ling Han tossed him to the ground and said, "If you keep your promise, you'll have to eat it even if it's shit. If you dare to touch a single hair on my head, I guarantee that the Treasure Forest Pavilion will tear you to shreds." He Jingyun threatened. If he crawled the streets in front of everyone, he wouldn't just be humiliating himself. Ling Han chuckled and said, "I'm so scared." He added another kick and said, "Crawl." He Jingyun was naturally unwilling. If he crawled, he would really be too ashamed to face others. "Who the hell do you think you are? You talk like you're farting." Ling Han stomped on He Jingyun's face. However, He Jingyun's stubbornness was evident for once. He actually buried his head into the shattered bricks, planning to be a coward. Although it wasn't a glorious thing to be stomped on, it was still better than crawling the streets in front of everyone. "Grandmaster Ling, it's about time to stop," Alchemist Hu and the others advised. "All right, I'll let him go if one of you crawls for him," said Ling Han with a smile. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion looked at each other, and they hurriedly shook their heads. What a joke! He Jingyun's face was face, but their face was nothing. "Quick, get reinforcements." They held back Ling Han as they waited for reinforcements from the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Ling Han did not mind. Even if He Jingyun did not crawl on the street, he would still lose face after being stepped on like that. After a while, more people from the Treasure Forest Pavilion finally arrived. "Stop!" a cultivator shouted. He was definitely not an alchemist, as there was not the slightest hint of medicinal scent on his body. As he shouted, 2 complete suns and moons appeared behind him, showing that he was at the peak stage of the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. "Okay." Ling Han readily agreed, but his feet were still stomping madly. "I told you to stop." The elite was enraged, and he stretched out a palm to grab Ling Han. Ling Han punched out with a smile and said, "I did stop, but you didn't tell me to stop." His body suddenly sank as their attacks collided. His power was comparable to the late stage of the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, but it was still 10 times weaker than the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier. However, his physique was far too powerful, so he was completely unaffected by this attack. However, don't forget that he was stepping on He Jingyun, and this irresistible force was instantly transmitted through Ling Han's feet to his body. Pa. The bricks on the ground were all crushed into powder, and he was deeply embedded into the ground. Not even his figure could be seen. "You!" The elite was enraged. He was a protector of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and although his power could not be considered top tier, compared to Ling Han, who was only at the early stage of the Sun-Moon tier, he should naturally be able to crush him. However, the reality was completely different from what he had imagined. "Heh, do you still want to compete?" Ling Han's eyes swept over him. Among the newcomers of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, there was not only this elite. There were also a few other alchemists. One was that they had immersed themselves in alchemy for too long, and the smell of medicine could be seen even with the naked eye. The smell of medicine steamed behind him, turning into a dense mist. "Young man, could it be that you're also a level 7 alchemist?" An elder humphed, his eyes filled with disbelief. Although Big Trade City was large, from the perspective of the entire Imperial Empire, it was actually a small city. Right, the most powerful force in the vicinity, the Cloud Phoenix sect, only had elites at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. Thus, the highest alchemist that the Treasure Forest Pavilion could concoct here was only a level 7 alchemist. Occasionally, there would be level 8 alchemists who would concoct some level 8 divine pills. Because there were only a few elites at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier here, who would they sell to if they concocted too many level 8 divine pills? This elder's surname was Li, and he was one of the 3 level 7 alchemists that were permanently stationed at the Treasure Forest Pavilion. He had been at this level for close to 2 million years, and it was probably impossible for him to advance to level 8 in his lifetime. However, because he was old enough, he was naturally arrogant. Now, a young man who knew how much younger than him could actually be a level 7 alchemist? How could he not be extremely jealous? Ling Han scoffed and said, "Old man, you've lived like a dog for so many years. You haven't improved at all, yet you're jealous of others. That's very bad." Alchemist Li almost exploded in anger. He chided, "You have no respect for your elders. You're too rude." Ling Han shook his head and said, "We're all level 7 alchemists, so how can I be rude? Respect is earned through strength, not through self-praise." "Fine, I'll compete with you," Alchemist Li roared. His white hair fluttered in anger, and he wanted to eat Ling Han alive. But Ling Han nodded and said, "Then should we add another wager or something?" He pointed at He Jingyun, who was still beneath his feet. At this moment, He Jingyun didn't know how many fucking horses were galloping through his mind. Alchemist Li humphed and said, "If you lose, you'll immediately scram from Big Trade City." "Fine, if you lose, please scram as well," Ling Han said calmly. Grandmaster Li, the members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion hurriedly said. This young man was far too freakish, and his strength was unfathomable. It was truly thoughtless to make such a wager. "Humph, do you all not trust me?" Alchemist Li humphed, and swept his gaze across the crowd. It was clear that he was very displeased. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion all wiped away their cold sweat. They had all seen Ling Han's performance before. This young man couldn't be judged by appearance or age at all. His alchemy skills could only be described as unfathomable. If he failed miserably, wouldn't he be completely humiliated? "Brat, bring it on. Today, I'll teach you what it means to be experienced," Alchemist Li challenged Ling Han. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "Since you're so old, I'll choose first. I'll refine the spiritual rain bone developing pill." Pooh! Alchemist Li spluttered. Chapter 1230. The spiritual rain bone developing pill was definitely one of the best tier 7 god pills, be it in terms of its effects or the difficulty of its refinement. Alchemist Li will not. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was very awesome, and it could be said that an old man like him was extremely loyal. Thus, he was naturally able to obtain the trust of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. As long as the pill level was right, the Treasure Forest Pavilion would unconditionally provide any pill recipe that he wanted to learn. The spiritual rain bone developing pill was an ancient recipe, yet the Treasure Forest Pavilion still possessed it. Alchemist Li had also learned it before, but after failing a few hundred times, he no longer dared to try again. Can't afford to lose like this. Alchemists were rich, but did level 7 ingredients not need money? Not only did they need money, but they were also ridiculously expensive. He didn't want to be outdone and say that he would also refine the spiritual rain bone developing pill to compete with him, but he really didn't have the confidence to do so. His expression changed. If Ling Han could really concoct the spiritual rain bone developing pill, then no matter what kind of pill he concocted, even if it was perfect, it would be useless. There would only be one word for him: defeat. No, he doesn't believe it. If such a young lad was able to surpass him in alchemy, then hadn't he been living like a dog for the past 2 million years? I will refine the 4-cloud 4-rise pill. This was the most difficult level 7 medicinal pill he could refine. Although it could not compare to the spiritual rain bone developing pill, at least he could not lose out in terms of momentum. Both sides prepared their materials and started refining. He Jingyun had already been dug out by someone. His face was now colorful, and it was incomparably fascinating. Logically speaking, after losing so much face, he should leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be a disgrace to be looked at by others. But he didn't want to leave. He wanted to see this battle with his own eyes. He wanted Ling Han to fail. But as soon as the competition started, he realized that something was wrong. Ling Han was far more composed than Alchemist Li. One had to know that the spiritual rain bone developing pill that Ling Han had concocted was far more difficult than the 4 clouds rising pill, but he was even more composed. What did this mean? Their strengths were not on the same level. Unfortunately, Pill Master Li could not afford to be distracted in the slightest. The Four Clouds Four Rise pill was the most difficult level 7 divine pill he had mastered. However, he could not guarantee success every time he refined such a divine pill, so he naturally had to be extremely careful. The time required to concoct a level 7 god pill was even longer, 20 days as a base. As for a level 8 god pill, it would take at least a month. Everyone went back to what they were doing. Apart from the members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion and the Han Lin Pavilion, everyone else left. It wouldn't be too late to come back after a dozen or so days. However, on the 16th day, Pill Master Li was defeated. The furnace had exploded. Bam! With a loud bang, the pill furnace exploded. Fortunately, the consequences weren't serious. It was fine as long as the pill furnace exploded. Otherwise, more than half of the people here would have died. The old man was in a daze. His furnace had actually exploded, so he could only hope that Ling Han's furnace had also exploded. Otherwise, as long as the other party could refine the pill, he would win. After a few more days, Ling Han stopped and fiercely slapped the furnace lid. With a light sound, 3 medicinal pills flew out. They were surrounded by divine light and shockingly resplendent. Pills formed. Pill Master Li instantly collapsed to the ground. Ling Han had actually refined the spiritual rain bone developing pill. Even if his furnace hadn't exploded, he would still be in awe of Ling Han. Moreover, Ling Han hadn't just refined pills. He had refined a whole 3 pills. How terrifying! Ling Han held the 3 spiritual rain bone developing pills in his hand and said with a smile, "Do you want to inspect them, Pill Master Li?" "No, there's no need," Alchemist Li said dejectedly. He had personally witnessed Ling Han concoct alchemical pills in the following few days. Even he found Ling Han's natural and smooth movements to be pleasing to the eye. Ling Han's skills were far superior to his own. He crawled to his feet and pushed through the crowd as he strode forward. His figure appeared extremely stooped. Everyone sighed. This was a level 7 alchemist. The alchemists of the Treasure Forest Pavilion hurriedly chased after him, all of them trying to dissuade him. However, Pill Master Li smiled and said, "I naturally have to keep my word. I will never return to Big Trade City. However, I only said that I would leave Big Trade City. I didn't say that I would leave the Treasure Forest Pavilion. I can go to a branch in another city." Everyone's faces twitched. Sure enough, the older the ginger, the spicier it was. After going around in a circle, he was still staying in the Treasure Forest Pavilion. He had merely moved to another city. For alchemists, was it important where they refined their pills? However, being forced out of Big Trade City was still a stain on their reputation. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion all covered their faces as they left. They had won this competition by a large margin, yet they had suffered a crushing defeat afterward. Now, they couldn't produce a level 8 alchemist, so they naturally could only retreat. Staying here would only invite humiliation upon themselves. This was a competition of alchemy. Thus, even though the Treasure Forest Pavilion possessed powerful martial art, they couldn't act recklessly. After all, there were still some rules that they had to abide by. "Greetings, Grandmaster Ling." Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiao Yuan led the members of the Han Lin Pavilion in saluting Ling Han respectfully. Even though Ling Han was young, his alchemy prowess was clear for all to see. A level 7 alchemist wasn't awesome enough. Ling Han had no qualms accepting this. This was his disciple in the first place, so wasn't it normal for him to acknowledge him? He casually raised his hand and said, "There's no need." Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiao Yuan invited Ling Han into the inner room. There were naturally people outside to clean up the mess. After this competition, many people had come to purchase alchemical pills because of its reputation, and business was booming. Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiao Yuan were puzzled, and they asked, "Grandmaster, may I ask why you're helping us?" With Ling Han's alchemy prowess, he could definitely find a better future in the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Why did he have to submit to a small sect like theirs? In fact, he didn't even hesitate to oppose the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Ling Han sipped his tea, and after a while, he said, "I have some history with your sect." Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiao Yuan exchanged a glance. Neither of them understood where this history had come from. One had to realize that they had come to the immortal realm 10,000 years ago, and it was clear that no one from the lower realm could come up again. Those who had come up were all members of the 5 sects. A few years ago, I opened the sky and came from the lower realm. Ling Han decided to divulge a little secret. What? Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiao Yuan stood up at the same time. They were so shocked that their scalps went numb. The lower realm? It was actually the lower realm. How is this possible? Kong Xiao Yuan shook his head repeatedly. Who didn't know that the lower realm was controlled by the 5 sects? To say nothing of opening the sky, even shattering void tier cultivators would fall into the formation set up by the 5 sects and die. Opening the sky meant that one had to break through the seals set up by the 5 sects. Was this possible? Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "There is nothing in this world that is impossible." So what if it's the 5 sects? Can they hide the truth from the masses? This was true. Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiao Yuan looked at each other, and they felt as if the efforts of the 3 of them for close to 10,000 years had all gone to waste. Chapter 12:32. This woman's status was high and lofty, and no one dared to talk back to her. This woman's status was high and lofty, and no one dared to talk back to her. It wasn't that she was ugly, but rather that she was too seductive, and if they looked at her too much, they would become impulsive. They wouldn't even know how they died. "Master, our business has fallen by at least 20%, and the Han Lin Pavilion has earned all of it," a protector said. Lin Yuqi lazily leaned back in her chair and said, "So many days have passed, and you still haven't come up with a solution?" An old alchemist said, "Master, the most important thing in an alchemy competition is strength. We have lost in the competition of high-level alchemical pills, and this has caused many customers to lose confidence in us. If we want to turn the tables, we must defeat the Han Lin Pavilion in alchemy," a senior alchemist said. Although alchemists had a lofty status, as long as they lived in this mortal world, how could they escape fame and fortune? Lin Yuqi's background was too powerful, so even alchemists had to be respectful to her. "Don't talk nonsense. Where's the solution?" Lin Yuqi waved her hand, appearing very impatient. The old alchemist said, "There are 2 solutions." He paused and then said, "First, the Han Lin Pavilion can only rely on an alchemist named Ling Han. If we can recruit him, the Han Lin Pavilion will be beaten back to its original state." Lin Yuqi nodded and asked, "What about the second?" "That Ling Han claims to be a level 7 alchemist," the old alchemist said. "We only need to invite a level 8 alchemist to compete with him. Regardless of whether it's a competition of level 7 or level 8 alchemical pills, we will definitely win. However, the level 8 alchemist is not permanently stationed in our pavilion. Even if we immediately send out a request, it will take 2 or 3 months for him to reach our city. If there are any delays along the way, it will take even longer." Lin Yuqi paused for a moment and then said, "Then let's try both ways. First, recruit that Ling Han. If he is willing to obey, that will naturally be the best. If he refuses to listen, then suppress him." The old alchemist nodded and said, "Yes." Lin Yuqi thought for a moment, and then said, "It seems like that Ling Han's alchemy skills aren't bad. In that case, why don't you set a higher price? We'll do it according to the standards of a level 8 alchemist." "Yes." The old alchemist nodded. He believed that as long as Ling Han was not an idiot, he would definitely agree to such conditions. But what he never expected was that before he could even see Ling Han's face, he was directly asked to leave by Ling Han's 2 followers. After reporting this matter to Lin Yuqi, this seductive beauty was naturally enraged. She ordered for a level 8 alchemist to be transferred over as soon as possible so that she could thoroughly suppress Ling Han. Unfortunately, that level 8 alchemist had actually gone into seclusion at this critical juncture. Apparently, he had obtained an ancient pill recipe and was currently focused on studying it. Thus, he wouldn't be able to return anytime soon. Right now, the Treasure Forest Pavilion couldn't do anything. They could only watch as the Han Lin Pavilion grew stronger day by day. However, in at most half a year, regardless of whether he had finished studying it or not, that alchemist would definitely come out for a breather. At that time, someone would naturally pass on the news and invite that level 8 alchemist over to deal with Ling Han. At the same time, Ling Han was also diligently studying the berserk blood spirit pill in seclusion. This kind of alchemical pill was also known as the saintly medicine of the sun-moon tier in ancient times. Not only was it astonishingly effective, but it was also especially difficult to refine. One had to extract and interweave the medicinal properties, and the complexity was comparable to low-level level 9 divine pills. A whole half a year passed, and Ling Han finally understood every step. Next, it was the actual refinement. Ling Han's heart ached slightly because he definitely couldn't succeed on his first try. However, if he failed once, he would waste a red rain divine king fruit, and this represented a subminor level of the sun-moon tier. However, if he didn't refine it, that would be even more of a waste. No matter how precious the red rain divine king fruit was, it only represented wealth at most. He began to attempt to refine it. Failure, 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 failure. Level 8 divine pills were indeed difficult to refine. Even though Ling Han had already grasped every step and was extremely familiar with the interweaving of divine patterns, he was still prone to making mistakes during the actual refinement process. He had comprehended these divine patterns under the reincarnation tree, which was equivalent to having spent over 100 years to familiarize himself with them. There was a huge difference between being an armchair strategist and actually fighting. Ling Han's heart ached to death. The number of red rain divine king fruits was continuously decreasing. From a maximum of 129, it had already dropped to 87. He could clearly calculate how many times he had failed. When there were only 46 red rain divine king fruits left, Ling Han finally refined the first cauldron of berserk blood spirit pill. Just one. This wasn't a problem of his ability, because he could produce one berserk blood spirit pill with each cauldron. There was only a difference in quality, not quantity. Success, I've finally succeeded. Ling Han laughed loudly. He wasn't in a hurry to consume this divine pill. Instead, he immediately sat down in a cross-legged position and summarized the various shortcomings in his alchemy this time. It was precisely because he had this kind of habit that he was able to advance rapidly on the path of alchemy. With the help of the reincarnation tree, he was naturally like a tiger that had grown wings. 2 days later, he concluded his summary and continued to concoct. Another pill was formed, and its quality had also improved slightly. Ling Han broke into a grin. If he could ingest these 2 berserk blood spirit pills in succession, his cultivation level would rapidly rise by 2 subminor levels. His battle prowess would also obviously rise by 2 stars. However, ingesting a berserk blood spirit pill required 3 days of refining. Ling Han had already been in seclusion for so long, so it was about time for him to go out and see what was going on. He exited the Black Tower, and just as he pushed open the door, he saw Zhu Wujiu run over. He exclaimed in pleasant surprise, "Young Master Han, you've finally come out of seclusion. What is it?" The Treasure Forest Pavilion has sent another letter of challenge, saying that they want to challenge young Master Han, Zhu Wujiu said. He paused for a moment and then continued, "The letter of challenge was sent over 2 months ago, but young Master Han has been in seclusion this entire time and hasn't responded even after so long. Now, everyone is saying that young Master Han is afraid to accept the challenge." Ling Han couldn't help but smile. He never cared about what others thought. It wasn't like he was living for them to control. In any case, as long as he possessed absolute power, what could others do? Since that's the case, I'll go and meet them. Ling Han headed toward the Hanlin Pavilion. Upon entering, he discovered that there were unusually few customers here. The entire store was deserted, and most of the employees were idling around. They were far too idle. However, because Ling Han was afraid to accept the challenge, the reputation that the Hanlin Pavilion had built up had completely collapsed. Now, it was only natural that no one paid any attention to it. "Grand Elder, you've finally come out." Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiu Yuan's frown disappeared as if they had seen their savior. Ling Han chuckled and said, "In the past, it was always them who came here to challenge us. Today, let's go to the Treasure Forest Pavilion and challenge them as well. Sure. Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiu Yuan nodded excitedly. They naturally had a belly full of anger. Chapter 1233. However, the Treasure Forest Pavilion has dispatched a level 8 alchemist this time, Kong Xiu Yuan said. Moreover, he's renowned as a prodigy. Of course, the purpose of this challenge was to win. However, if they were beaten up instead, that wouldn't be fun. Level 8 alchemist Ling Han smiled. If this had been half a year ago, he would have had to reconsider. After all, having a level 8 alchemist concoct a level 7 alchemical pill would definitely be able to greatly increase the success rate, and the quality of the pill would also be improved. He was confident, but he wasn't certain that he would win. But now, he had already concocted the Berserk Blood Spirit pill, and his skill level was close to that of a level 9 alchemist. What did he have to fear from a level 8 alchemist? It's fine, Ling Han said. Kong Xiu Yuan and Yun Yong Wang exchanged a glance, and then nodded in agreement. Ling Han's achievements in alchemy were astonishing. If he were to refine level 7 alchemical pills, even a level 8 alchemist might not be able to suppress him. The three of them quickly arrived at the Treasure Forest Pavilion. In comparison, the time-honored Treasure Forest Pavilion was truly imposing and majestic. Just the area it occupied was 10 times larger than that of the Han Lin Pavilion. It didn't look like a pharmacy at all. Instead, it looked like a magnificent palace. Because they had suppressed the Han Lin Pavilion earlier, this place naturally regained its former liveliness. There was a long line of customers coming in and out of the entrance, and it seemed as if it would never stop. Ling Han strode over and loudly said, "The great elder of the Han Lin Pavilion, Ling Han, has come to issue a challenge. Does anyone dare to accept it?" With this shout, the never-ending stream of passengers suddenly stopped, and they all rushed toward Ling Han. The Han Lin Pavilion accepted the challenge. This is going to be fun. After a short while, a voice traveled out from the Treasure Forest Pavilion. "Heh, Grandmaster Ling has been a coward for so many years, and he finally dares to show his face. That dog is barking." Ling Han immediately scolded. You dare call me a dog?" The voice said angrily. "Ha, I'm just saying. Why do you think so highly of me?" Ling Han laughed. "Do you feel guilty that you're in the wrong? That's why you think that whenever the word dog is mentioned, it's related to you? Damn it." Bam! The sound of things being smashed could be heard in the main hall. Clearly, someone was very angry. Master Ling is indeed not simple, seizing the person first. Another old voice rang out, and an old alchemist walked out from the main hall. Because there was a long flight of stairs leading from the path to the door, the old man stood there and instantly looked down at Ling Han from a high vantage point. To actually play such a small trick in front of him. Ling Han's figure swayed, and he instantly turned into a giant. Under the powerful Yuan power, this was naturally a piece of cake. He looked down at the old alchemist and said, "I've come to accept the challenge. Who from the Treasure Forest Pavilion wishes to fight me?" The corner of the old alchemist's mouth twitched. He thought to himself, this kid really doesn't want to suffer any losses. He chuckled and said, "Then please wait for a moment, Master Ling. I will go and invite Master Han out." He turned around and entered the main hall, while Ling Han also retracted his figure. This kind of fight was just for fun. This world was all about strength. "Let's go," Ling Han said and took the lead. Kong Xiu Yuan and Kong Xiu Yuan exchanged a glance, and then hurriedly followed. A strange feeling welled up in their hearts as they looked at Ling Han, who was in front of them. It was as if they had returned to the lower realm, where they had followed their master and defeated all kinds of famous alchemists. In the end, they had established Ling Han's status as the Alchemy Emperor. The three of them quickly entered the main hall, and the other party was already waiting for them. They formed a human wall, all of them crossing their arms over their chests, appearing to be very aggressive. Ling Han retrieved a chair from the Black Tower and sat down. He didn't treat himself as an outsider at all, and he was extremely calm. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion were all enraged by this. "How confident are you? You're acting as if you're the master of this place." After a while, the human wall suddenly parted, and a woman walked out from the main hall. This was a beautiful woman with a frosty expression. Her figure was extremely slender, and her skin was extremely fair. If one had to point out a flaw, it would be that her breasts were a bit flat, and she wasn't voluptuous enough. So you're Ling Han? The beautiful woman swept her eyes over Ling Han, and a look of disdain and even disgust involuntarily appeared on her face. I'm a level 8 alchemist. Why aren't you bowing to me? Tsk, how overbearing. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, how do you know that I'm not a level 9 alchemist? Isn't that obvious? Is there a level 9 alchemist as young as you? Do you think everyone is called Han Xinyan? The beautiful woman was incredibly proud. She was a true alchemy prodigy, and she was only 10,000 years old now, yet she was already a level 8 alchemist. She hadn't advanced to level 9 because she was limited by her cultivation level in martial art. Her divine sense wasn't strong enough, and the divine flame she could summon wasn't strong enough either. Ling Han appeared to be even younger than she was, and he wanted to surpass her in alchemy? She didn't believe it. Humph, fine, Han Xinyan said haughtily. Then let's compete. If you lose, you'll obediently kowtow to me 100 times and admit that you've been rude. Ling Han smiled and said, then if you lose, a gentleman like me won't make you kowtow to me or anything. You'll just have to pour me a cup of tea and write me a sign of admiration. A cold glint flashed in Han Xinyan's eyes. This junior was actually so arrogant, and she was enraged. Alchemy was like martial art. The difference of one tier was like the difference between heaven and earth. A mere level 7 alchemist actually dared to act so arrogantly in front of a level 8 alchemist? This was great disrespect. She suppressed her anger and said, then let's cut the nonsense and begin refining the pill. Since you're a junior, I'll choose first. Refine the spiritual rainbow developing pill. Hearing her words, the crowd erupted into an uproar. Everyone knew that Ling Han had successfully refined the spiritual rainbow developing pill and defeated Alchemist Li of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, turning the tables in a single move. Now, however, Han Xinyan actually chose to refine the spiritual rainbow developing pill. She had absolute confidence in herself. She had defeated her opponent in her field of expertise. How domineering! Ling Han waved his hand and said, we're not competing in level 7 alchemical pills today. Ha! Could it be that you want to refine a level 6 alchemical pill? Han Xinyan chuckled coldly. No, we're competing in level 8 alchemical pills, Ling Han said. The crowd instantly fell deathly silent. You must be joking, right? You said yourself that you're only a level 7 alchemist. Why is it that only half a year has passed, and you're already saying that you're going to refine a level 8 divine pill? What kind of person can advance at such a rapid pace? Kang Xiaoyuan and Ling Han were about to go crazy with anxiety. You're going to explode the moment you start refining? Won't you become a laughingstock? A sneer appeared on Han Xinyan's face, and she said, don't say goodbye to me. You can still refine level 8 alchemical pills? Why not? Ling Han retrieved his alchemy cauldron and said, what I'm going to refine today is the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. What? Han Xinyan's expression changed. The Berserk Blood Spirit pill was a pill recipe that had been lost a long time ago. At the very least, no one in the Long Light Galaxy knew how to refine it. This pill recipe was far too valuable. Moreover, if a completed pill appeared, it would definitely cause an intense commotion. Chapter 1234. Is this guy bluffing? Han Xinyan couldn't make up her mind. The man in front of her was too confident. Either he had a card up his sleeve, or he was a lunatic. Then let's compete in refining 8th level pills, she said solemnly. At this moment, she really took Ling Han seriously and didn't dare to underestimate him anymore. I will refine the 9 Emperor Golden Bell pill. This was also a level 8 alchemical pill, but it couldn't compare to the Berserk Blood Spirit pill in terms of medicinal efficacy or difficulty. However, the Berserk Blood Spirit pill could almost be considered a level 9 alchemical pill. Thus, no matter what alchemical pill she chose to refine, it would be impossible for it to surpass the Berserk Blood Spirit pill in terms of difficulty. Naturally, it didn't matter what she refined. As long as Ling Han successfully refined the Berserk Blood Spirit pill, regardless of the quality of the pill, Ling Han would be the winner. But on the other hand, if Ling Han's cauldron exploded while she formed the pill, then the one who lost would naturally be Ling Han. Please. Both sides began to prepare their ingredients, and when Ling Han took out the Red Rain Divine King fruit, Han Xinyan's beautiful eyes involuntarily narrowed. He had even taken out such a divine fruit, so Ling Han was definitely not joking. Otherwise, the price would be too great. This guy, if he really grasped such an ancient recipe, he might even be able to successfully refine it. She felt that it was absurd, but for some reason, deep in her heart, she actually believed that Ling Han could succeed. This made her heart flustered. How could he predict that she would lose before the competition had even begun? The guests were all isolated at the door, and a restriction was laid down to prevent them from making any noise and disturbing the competition between the two. Yun Yong Wang and Kang Xiao Yuan could only place their trust in Ling Han now. However, they were also unable to accept this. Only half a year had passed, yet this grand elder had already risen to the next level. Hong, Divine Flame's sword. The two young alchemists had already begun their own refinement. As soon as Ling Han started refining pills, he immediately entered a state of forgetting himself and everything else. The Berserk Blood Spirit pill was the most difficult pill he had ever encountered. Furthermore, it was also his current limit. Thus, even he had to be extremely careful. A single mistake would cause all his previous efforts to go to waste. The refinement of a rank 8 divine pill required an entire month's time. Not only was this a test of patience and willpower, it also required the support of formidable origin energy and the soul. Because this was equivalent to an all-out battle, how many people could continuously fight for such a long time? A slight pause could cause the furnace to explode. Therefore, the higher up one went, the fewer pill refiners there were. Ling Han forgot about everything else. This was not just a competition. The Berserk Blood Spirit pill that he had refined was the divine medicine that he needed at his current stage. Thus, since he could defeat the enemy and benefit himself at the same time, he naturally had to be serious. During the month of alchemy, everyone came and went, and came and went. Aside from alchemists, who would have the patience to watch from beginning to end. However, to the majority of alchemists, this was truly a sumptuous feast. Watching two level 8 alchemists fight was extremely beneficial to them. When the last day arrived, almost everyone in the city came to witness the final result. Open! Ling Han and Han Xinyan simultaneously slapped their pill furnaces. The lid of the pill furnaces instantly flew into the air. This time, however, Ling Han didn't hold back anymore. He used the 3-fire guide, the technique that he was most proficient in. Yun Yong Wang and Kang Xiao Yuan's mouths gaped open so wide that one could stuff an egg inside. 3-fire guide. That's definitely the 3-fire guide. The two of them exclaimed in their minds. However, the 3-fire guide was clearly their master's ultimate technique, and he had only taught it to the two of them. They hadn't taught it to anyone else in the lower realm. So, where had Ling Han learned it from? Could it be that he was their master's disciple? Xiao. A brilliant alchemical pill flew out from the pill furnace and danced wildly in the air. This was the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. It had been refined. Han Xinyan merely glanced at it before sighing in her mind. With her judgment, she was able to determine that the pill Ling Han had concocted was definitely the Berserk Blood Spirit pill just by looking at the Red Rain Divine King fruit among the ingredients. Now that the pill had been refined, the result was obvious. She had lost, and Ling Han had won. I've lost. She was completely convinced. Everyone was stunned. Who would have thought that Ling Han had actually become a level 8 alchemist? Moreover, he had defeated the prodigy among prodigies, Han Xinyan. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion were all petrified. During the past half a year, they had been waiting for the level 8 alchemist who had been studying ancient pill recipes in seclusion. However, that alchemist still hadn't come out. Coincidentally, Han Xinyan had coincidentally come to Lin Yuqi's place, and she had been asked by Lin Yuqi to challenge the Han Lin Pavilion. Han Xinyan was a renowned young alchemist, and there were countless halos above her head. In any case, she was born for alchemy, and she was one of the 10 most talented alchemists of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. Yet she had lost to an even younger alchemist. Inconceivable. Truly inconceivable. Han Xinyan was indeed proud, but she wasn't someone who would go back on her word. She immediately brought over a teacup and offered it to Ling Han. Then, she used her finger like a sword and carved the word, convinced, under Ling Han's feet. She was willing to accept her loss, and she was open and honest. Ling Han nodded in his mind. This woman's temperament was good, and she was also very talented in alchemy. This made him want to take her as his 6th disciple. However, the two of them were at the same level of alchemy. Moreover, they were on opposing sides. If he said that he wanted to take her as his disciple, he would probably be rolled her eyes. He took a sip of tea and said, "We've competed in alchemy, and we've drunk our tea. Farewell." "Wait," Han Xinyan said. She bit her lip and said, "I'll challenge you again." "Sure. But that'll have to wait until I have the time." Ling Han smiled. He wasn't trying to shirk his responsibility. Rather, his focus was ultimately on martial art. He couldn't continue to refine alchemy. Ling Han swaggered off with Yun Yong Wang and the other young man in tow. The spectators naturally dispersed as well. However, when the three of them returned to the Han Lin Pavilion, they immediately discovered that there were at least 5 times more customers here than when they had left. Moreover, this was only the beginning. "May I ask, Grand Elder, did you use the 3 Fire Guide?" Kong Xiao Yuan asked eagerly after they returned to the Han Lin Pavilion. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Not bad." After half a year of observation, though it was not him, but Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiao, Ling Han could conclude that these 2 disciples did not have any connection with the Cloud Phoenix sect, so they should not have forgotten their duties. "Grand Elder, where did you learn this secret technique?" Yun Yong Wang asked. "Where?" Ling Han smiled as he reminisced. "This is a technique that I invented." Yun Yong Wang and Kong Xiao Yuan stood up at the same time, expressions of anger on their faces. He actually dared to say that the 3 Fire Guide created by their master was invented by him? This was too shameless. No matter how much he helped the Han Lin Pavilion, there was a principle that they couldn't back down from. That was their master, who was like a god or a true immortal. He couldn't be blasphemed. "I think it's time for Grand Elder to leave," Yun Yong Wang said coldly. "Reading on cell phones is more refreshing." Chapter 12:36. Jiang Yufeng was naturally in the Heaven Sword Palace now, while Chen Ruijing was exploring various places. He was a cultivator and needed to improve his strength through battle. As for the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, she was currently living in seclusion in the Water Element Valley, a place about 1,500 kilometers away from here. Ling Han decided to immediately go find the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Overthrowing the 5 sects could be done slowly, but this wife had already been here for 10,000 years, and he didn't want to wait a moment longer. He exited the Han Lin Pavilion and was just about to set off when he saw a carriage blocking his way. A woman in azure curtsied slightly on the carriage and said, "Grandmaster Ling, my mistress invites you." "Your mistress?" Ling Han was surprised. "Who is it?" "Grandmaster Ling, you'll know when you get on the carriage." The woman in azure pursed her lips into a smile, revealing a beautiful charm. She was dressed like a servant girl, but if a servant girl had such a seductive charm, then what kind of seductive beauty would her master be? Ordinary people would definitely be filled with endless fantasies and gladly agree to get on the carriage to see this mistress' true appearance. But how could Ling Han be in the mood for that now? He shook his head and said, "Then forget it." He flicked his sleeves and swaggered off. Hey. The woman in azure hurriedly leaped down from the carriage, blocking Ling Han's path. Moreover, she stuck out her perky breasts, almost bumping into Ling Han, forcing Ling Han to take a step back. If a woman became shrewish, men really had to be careful. Otherwise, if you were touched by her breasts, it would definitely be because you wanted to take advantage of her. That had to be the case. Grandmaster Ling, my mistress is one of the few beauties in the world. Who knows how many talented people line up to see my mistress, but that also depends on my mistress' mood. The woman in azure was slightly proud. Now that my mistress has taken the initiative to invite you, you actually refuse. Aren't you afraid of making my mistress sad? What does that have to do with me? Ling Han said calmly. Then I won't allow it. The woman in azure said, and reached out to grab Ling Han. Grandmaster Ling, since you are not willing to get on the carriage obediently, I can only make you submit. Boom. A terrifying aura surged from her body. She was actually an elite of the Sun-Moon tier. Ling Han was astonished. This mighty elite of the Sun-Moon tier could go anywhere, yet he insisted on becoming a servant of others? However, he was naturally unafraid. He clenched his fist and punched at his opponent. Because he had cultivated the lightning sword technique and comprehended a trace of the power of the heavenly tribulation, his punch was not only fast, but it was also imbued with the power of thunder and lightning. Its destructive power was astonishing. Lightning flashed. The green-clothed woman couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression, but it was already too late for her to withdraw her attack, and her delicate hand just happened to collide with Ling Han's fist. Pung! A heavy sound resounded, and both of them retreated. This woman was at the late stage of the Sun-Moon tier, and she wasn't a multi-star genius. Thus, her power was merely on par with Ling Han's. However, Ling Han's punch was imbued with the power of the heavenly tribulation. How astonishing was its destructive power! Instantly, the green-clothed woman's delicate hand was drenched with blood. I really didn't think that Grandmaster Ling is actually an elite of martial art. The green-clothed woman channeled her cultivation technique and stopped the bleeding. There was a hint of surprise on her face, but she didn't panic. However, since Madam has given the order, Grandmaster Ling should obediently cooperate. Her eyes widened. 2 suns and moons appeared, yet they didn't exude any heat. Instead, they were filled with a gloomy coldness. Frost appeared in the surroundings and fell down. The suns and moons were only like the suns and moons in the sky. Some people cultivated the power of ice, so the suns and moons were naturally incredibly cold, exuding a boundless power of cold. Sun and moon released. Ling Han nodded in his mind. The level of martial art here was indeed higher than on the Joint Peace Planet. At least on the Joint Peace Planet, only Venerable Trinity could release the Eternal River. The others could only use the power of the mountains, rivers, suns, moons, and stars. This kind of coldness was enough to freeze Ling Han's blood and seal his body in ice. However, this was far from enough to defeat him. His whole body exuded the light of thunder. Lightning interweaved and instantly kept the power of ice 3 feet away from his body. Ice-sealing spear! The green-clothed woman shouted softly. Boundless cold air condensed into an ice spear that was 3 feet long. Then she fiercely pierced it toward Ling Han. The cold wind swirled and turned into countless ice blades. Ling Han pointed out with a finger. Boundless sword intent manifested and carried the power of lightning as it met the ice blades. Pa! All the ice blades were shattered. Ling Han stood with his hands behind his back and said, "Is this enough?" The green-clothed woman shook her ice spear and said, "Not enough." She continued to attack. Her spear continued to stab, and it could even be used as a staff. Under the infusion of the will of martial art, numerous divine patterns appeared on the ice spear, interweaving to form a brilliant light. Ling Han humphed and also unleashed his battle prowess. His fists bombarded the ice spear, continuously smashing into it. Cracks appeared on the ice spear, and after taking a heavy punch from Ling Han, it finally shattered bit by bit. Meanwhile, the green-clothed woman's face was also deathly pale, and her hair was disheveled. She no longer had the slightest bit of beauty and allure. She couldn't help but be stunned. Ling Han was only at the early stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, yet he had managed to defeat her head-on. His strength was too astonishing. However, she didn't admit defeat. Instead, she retrieved a divine seal and was about to slap it on her body. "Qing Luo, enough." A bone-piercing seductive voice traveled out from the carriage. It was none other than the leader of the Treasure Forest Pavilion of Big Trade City, Lin Yuqi. As a fragrant fragrance wafted through the air, the carriage door had already opened. A beautiful woman with an impressive figure stood there, and just by standing there, one would be filled with endless fantasies. Moreover, it was clear that this woman was extremely adept at maximizing her charm. She wasn't just casually standing there. Instead, her slender figure was slightly slanted, and the curves of her entire body were completely accentuated. It was true that it wasn't the wine that intoxicated one, but the wine that intoxicated one. Grandmaster Ling, I'm not some dreadful beast. Are you afraid that I'll eat you up? She giggled, and her voice was like a swaying flower, extremely alluring. Hearing her say this, Ling Han naturally couldn't just walk away. He smiled and said, "What advice does Madam have?" "Come into the carriage first," Lin Yuqi said with a seductive smile. Ling Han hesitated slightly, but still nodded, and boarded the carriage. Lin Yuqi turned around and entered the carriage first. She was wearing a long red dress, which was well tailored and tightly wrapped around her perfect figure. If one stood behind her, one could clearly feel her willowy waist swaying gracefully. Moreover, her round bottom was also wrapped tightly in the fabric. With every step she took, a voluptuous bottom would be completely outlined. Her peach-shaped breasts were so tempting that one could drool. Ling Han could be considered to have seen many beauties, and in terms of seduction, Empress Luanxing was more than 10 times more seductive than her. However, in terms of how to display her charm in the most provocative manner, this woman was definitely the best. Even he didn't dare to do too much, fearing that he would become aroused. Chapter 1237. Lin Yuqi's every movement was enchanting. Empress Luanxing was a natural beauty. Even a single figure could make one's imagination run wild, and this woman displayed her charm to the extreme through all kinds of small body movements. She swayed her beautiful bottom, swaying left and right lightly. She was so seductive that one couldn't control himself. With a light twist, the curve of her bottom, which was like a peach, was revealed. The curve was like a hill, showing off the charm of a woman, making one want to reach out and touch it, personally experiencing the fullness, elasticity, and softness. Ling Han guarded his mind. This was also a great enchantress. What surprised him was that the black-clothed maidservant had clearly addressed this woman as Madam, but she did not have the hairstyle of a married woman. Normally, a married woman would have her hair tied up in a bun. It was impossible for an unmarried young woman to have such a hairstyle. Meanwhile, her black hair was loose like a waterfall, revealing a bit of snow white on her neck. The black and white formed a strong contrast. It was none of his business. Ling Han immediately said in his mind, could it be that she wasn't married, so he had to take her as his wife? There was naturally no need to take it to heart. The carriage was so small, but Lin Yuqi felt as if she had walked for a long time. Her enchanting and sexy figure was completely engraved in Ling Han's mind. Only then did she elegantly turn around, smiling, and say, "Young Master Ling, please sit." This smile was like 100 flowers blooming, and the whole carriage became much brighter. Ling Han smiled faintly, sat down, and said, "Madam, what business do you have with me?" He was in a hurry to go to the Water Element Valley to find the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, so he really didn't want to waste time. Seeing the impatience in his eyes, Lin Yuqi was so angry that her nose almost twisted. She was proud of her charm and loved to tease people, making them infatuated with her and show her ugly side. She never denied that she was a bewitching woman. She was just this cold and heartless. Who asked her to be so beautiful and enchanting, so she could be so willful? But Ling Han actually dared to show impatience to her. This was a slap to her face. If Ling Han only showed impatience on his face, then she could conclude that he was just putting on an act, using the tactic of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. He could also be considered an experienced playboy. However, right now, Ling Han's expression was completely calm, and the hint of impatience was revealed in his eyes. This led Lin Yuqi to believe that he really didn't want to see her. Moreover, Lin Yuqi was used to teasing men. As such, she was able to easily detect whether or not the other party had any inappropriate thoughts towards her. She was pissed. Lin Yuqi calmed herself down. How could it be that a bewitching woman like her was unable to seduce a young man? She didn't hold back at all as she flashed a bright smile. It was as if even refined iron could be melted into a soft, alluring smile. Can't I just invite young Master Ling for a chat if there's nothing going on? His voice was languid, and his hair seemed to have grown a pair of little hands, gently caressing his hair, making him feel hot. Ling Han shook his head and said, "If Madam doesn't have any instructions, then I will take my leave." He stood up and acted as if he was about to leave. Lin Yuqi was really about to explode in anger. With a flash, she appeared in front of Ling Han. Her speed was extraordinarily fast, causing Ling Han's expression to stiffen. This delicate and flirtatious woman was actually a great expert. He hadn't even seen her flash and turn clearly. If she had suddenly attacked him, it was extremely likely that he would have been struck. However, her breasts that were about to burst through her clothes were still trembling in front of him, almost crashing into him. This caused Ling Han to involuntarily frown, and he took a step back. He had already incurred enough love debts, so he naturally wouldn't abandon a woman who had already become his lover. However, he definitely didn't want to attract new partners. Seeing this, Lin Yuqi couldn't help but narrow her eyes. Her eyes narrowed into a slit, but it was enough to trap all the men in the world. She giggled and said in a flirtatious tone, "What are you afraid of? Are you worried that I will eat you up?" "Indeed." Ling Han nodded without any reservation and said, "Madam, please conduct yourself with dignity." Lin Yuqi giggled wantonly, and her chest shook in waves, causing one to be dazzled. He wanted to transform into a wild beast, pounce on this seductive beauty, and personally measure the size and feel of those two breasts. People say that a wife is inferior to a concubine, and a concubine is inferior to a mistress. Hee, do you want to have a taste of someone else's wife? She murmured softly, her voice full of temptation. "Brat, take the bait. If you show even the slightest bit of disgraceful behavior, I will beat you to death, then take you as a slave and make you work hard for the rest of your life. You dare to have any improper thoughts about me?" Ling Han smiled and said, "Madam, have you drunk too much? You're quite drunk. All right, I don't have time to play games with you. If you still don't move aside, I will have no choice but to destroy your steed." Lin Yuqi was at a loss for words. This guy had still rejected her. Woo! She suddenly collapsed to the ground and began to sob. "What the hell are you up to now? I didn't even touch you, so why do you look like you've been violated? It's best not to provoke me. Go." Ling Han was just about to raise his foot when his vision blurred. Lin Yuqi, who had been sitting on the ground and sobbing just a moment ago, had once again blocked his path. This woman's strength was truly a bit unfathomable, and her obstruction made Ling Han unable to fathom or guess what was going on. "You're bullying me," Lin Yuqi said in a sobbing tone. However, she was a seductive beauty in the first place, and her tear-stained appearance instantly caused one to feel a strong urge to ravage her. This kind of high and mighty noblewoman was the best at stimulating a man's desire to destroy and conquer. He really wanted to tear her clothes apart and make her submit to him. Ling Han bared his teeth. This femme fatale's charm was truly not small, causing him to overthink again. He hurriedly thought of Empress Luanxing. When that exquisite beauty appeared, Lin Yuqi immediately lost her luster. In front of him, she was completely ordinary, no longer possessing the slightest bit of allure. The Empress could actually use her as a mind-calming medicine? This was amazing. Lin Yuqi was once again rendered speechless. "I've already used my trump card, yet you still look like you're disdainful?" She was at her wit's end. Could it be that she had to strip? She was only playing. She was playing with a man's feelings, and she was playing with a man's pity. She had no intention of playing with herself at all. "Young Master Ling, please sit," she suddenly said with a serious expression. There was not a single tear on her seductive and beautiful face. Ling Han was slightly driven mad. "Say, are we familiar?" Is it really okay for you to play like this? However, this woman's strength was unfathomable. If she refused to let him leave, then Ling Han would have no other choice but to use the Black Tower. However, ever since he found out about the Celestial Realm, Ling Han had become more careful. He wanted to avoid exposing the secret of the Black Tower even more. What kind of existence was the Black Tower? The reincarnation tree needed 12 trillion years to grow, but it only needed 3 years in the Black Tower. Although it hadn't reached its full potential, it was already extremely nature-defying. In the Celestial Realm, it should also be an extraordinary precious treasure, right? He hadn't even advanced into the Genesis tier yet. If the elites of the Celestial Realm knew that he possessed the Black Tower, wouldn't that be seeking death? Chapter 12:38. What do you want, madam? Ling Han asked in a low voice. He still didn't know her identity. Lin Yuqi smiled sweetly and said, I am the shopkeeper of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Ling Han felt a little strange. Such a bewitching beauty with unfathomable power was only the shopkeeper of an alchemical store? He grumbled in his mind, but his expression didn't change as he said, so it's Shopkeeper Lin. TSK, I don't like this title. Lin Yuqi shook her head and sat down in an incredibly graceful position. Then she crossed her legs, revealing a long leg from her high-slit dress. It was long, slender, and as white as ivory. Because this carriage was very luxuriously decorated, the floor was covered with a thick fur carpet. She didn't even wear shoes, revealing a beautiful foot. Her 5 delicate toenails were painted bright red, complementing her snow-white foot. If one had some special fetish, they would definitely want to kneel and lick it. More importantly, she was lightly swaying her leg, and amidst the waves of fragrance, one's eyes couldn't help but wander into her dress, wanting to see more. Unfortunately, they could only see a tiny bit of her fair thigh. Why don't you call me Big Sister? Lin Yuqi pressed her fingers together, revealing her snow-white teeth and hazy eyes. It wasn't the wine that intoxicated her, she was intoxicated. Madam Lin. Ling Han was unmoved. Big Sister Lin is fine too. Lin Yuqi was quite tenacious. Madam Lin, Ling Han insisted. Lin Yuqi couldn't help but sigh. She had truly never seen a man like this. He was so cold and indifferent, and even she was slightly curious about him. She knew that when a woman became curious about a man, it was a sign of danger, and it was very likely that she would fall for him. However, she was confident that she could definitely control herself and make him fall for her. All right. Lin Yuqi finally didn't try to pester him. Little brother Han, do you know how much trouble you will attract by refining the Berserk Blood Spirit pill? The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched. This woman didn't give in at all. What, okay? Although she didn't ask him to call her sister, she called him Little Brother Han. Wasn't that the same? He was too lazy to argue with the other party. This would only lead the topic further and further away. Moreover, this woman was obviously a good talker. He could not allow himself to be led into the ditch by the other party. What kind of trouble? He asked. The Berserk Blood Spirit pill can raise one's cultivation level by a subminor level at the Sun-Moon tier, and it's known as the saintly medicine of the Sun-Moon tier. As long as one hasn't reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, they'll definitely target Little Brother Han, Lin Yuqi said sweetly, not holding back at all to display her seductive charm in front of Ling Han. Ling Han smiled and said, since that's the case, shouldn't those Sun-Moon tier elites be polite and respectful to me? Lin Yuqi laughed in an unbridled manner, allowing Ling Han's eyes to enjoy another round of tumultuous waves. She shook her head and said, Little Brother Han doesn't have any background, and the Han Lin Pavilion is only a small temple, so how could it possibly intimidate others? Once the news spreads, it won't be long before Little Brother Han is captured and forced to concoct alchemical pills all day long. Hee, Little Brother Han can't possibly think that alchemists can do whatever they want in the world just because they have a transcendent status, right? Of course not. The reason why alchemists had a transcendent status was because of the needs of cultivators. Since this status was given by cultivators, whether or not they acknowledged this kind of status depended on the mood of cultivators. An alchemist without the support of a powerful background was really only a tool for concocting alchemical pills. Ling Han smiled and asked, "Then what suggestion does Madam have?" "Join the Treasure Forest Pavilion," Lin Yuqi suddenly said with a serious expression. Just then, she had been so flirtatious and seductive that she wanted to charm him to death, yet she had suddenly become so businesslike and serious. This kind of contrast was too great, and even Ling Han found it a little hard to accept. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Although the Treasure Forest Pavilion is powerful and can even rival the heavens, I can't possibly leave the Han Lin Pavilion." A mesmerizing smile spread across Lin Yuqi's face again, and she said, "I'm not asking little brother Han to leave the Han Lin Pavilion. Since little brother Han can become the Grand Elder of the Han Lin Pavilion, why can't you also be a guest elder of the Treasure Forest Pavilion?" Ling Han was astonished. This was really a great gift. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was definitely a colossus, and its branches were spread all over the Cloud Apex planet. Even the Crimson Flame Emperor had to give it some face. Then, with the protection of this plaque, what Sun Moon Tear would dare to touch a single hair on Ling Han's head? However, Ling Han wasn't worried that some force would really capture him and force him to concoct alchemical pills. Instead, he thought of the 5 sects. The 5 sects had been able to establish themselves in the immortal realm for so many years, and moreover, they had refined the lower realm into so many realm pills. Could it be that no one in the immortal realm really knew about them? Perhaps there was a stronger force behind them? If Ling Han was alone, then after he clashed with the 5 sects, they would definitely ask for help from the force behind them if they were no match for him. However, if Ling Han also brought out the Treasure Forest Pavilion, then would the force behind the 5 sects still dare to make a move? Even if the 5 sects didn't have the support of such a force, they would still have some allies, right? The Treasure Forest Pavilion was enough to intimidate these people and make them watch without doing anything. Not bad, not bad. This identity was very useful. With this thought, Ling Han nodded and said, "Then I'll do as you say." "Thank you, madam." Lin Yuqi smiled sweetly, then raised a finger and said, "However, I have a condition." Ling Han nodded. She naturally wouldn't help him for no reason, so it was very normal for her to have a condition. He asked, "What condition?" If it wasn't too harsh, he would agree. However, if she wanted him to sacrifice himself, that was absolutely impossible. However, Lin Yuqi's condition was not no in the slightest. Choose one of the 2 options. The first option is to refine a berserk blood spirit pill for me every 10 years. The second option is to teach Xinyan the refinement method. These 2 conditions were really not simple. Ling Han pondered for a moment and then said, "Madam, you can obtain the Red Rain Divine King fruit. This is the key to refining the berserk blood spirit pill. Without this main ingredient, everything would be useless. If I couldn't obtain it, how could I dare to make such a condition?" Lin Yuqi said confidently. Ling Han nodded slowly and said, "All right, I can teach the refinement method to Miss Han." If he accepted the first condition, then he would be tied to the Treasure Forest Pavilion for the rest of his life. As such, he might as well choose the second condition. Although teaching someone to refine pills would take a very long time, it would be something that could be done once and for all. Moreover, he only had to copy the pill recipe to Han Xinyan, and when she had more or less grasped it, he would take some time to teach her. To him, it wouldn't take too much time. However, Lin Yuqi was slightly disappointed. Ling Han's reply once again proved that her charm was ineffective. Otherwise, he should have chosen the first condition. Wouldn't he be able to see her a few more times then? This damn brat. I don't believe it. Chapter 1240. After fighting fiercely for a while, Ling Han and Ma Zhang stopped fighting at the same time. Neither of them had fought seriously and were wary of each other. Who knew what killing moves the other was hiding? "Brat, we will meet again." Ma Zhang left with the 2 soldiers. "Of course we will meet again. You still have to rebuild this courtyard for me." Ling Han called out from behind. Ma Zhang almost stumbled. This brat really could not forget. Fuck, he was not the only one to blame. Ling Han watched the other leave and did not pursue. Obviously, the other had pounced on empty air and did not know the whereabouts of the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. This was the reason why he did not tangle with the other. Furthermore, he knew the other's identity. In any case, he was a subordinate of Great General Xie. Great General Xie should be Xie Qian, one of the 4 great generals of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. It was said that he was an Eternal River tier elite, though he did not know exactly what level he was at. If such an elite did not say it himself, who could estimate his cultivation level? Since that was the case, he could run, but the temple could not. Ling Han turned back. Perhaps Kong Xiu Yuan and the others knew where the heavenly phoenix divine maiden would go. They might even have gone to the Han Lin Pavilion, and he just happened to miss them. 2 days later, he returned to Big Trade City. Master. Kong Xiu Yuan immediately called out when he saw him, his expression filled with nervousness and panic. What is it? Ling Han asked. A letter from Master's wife. Kong Xiu Yuan handed over a letter. Ling Han was anxious in the first place and hurriedly snatched it. His eyes swept over it, and he soon understood the whole story. The matter was actually very simple. In order to increase their status, the Cloud Phoenix sect intended to establish a relationship with Great General Xie. But would a mighty Eternal River tier elite care about a Sun Moon tier force? Then, even if they could not establish a relationship with Great General Xie, they could use a roundabout way to save the country. Thus, they sought out the 7th-generation grandson of Great General Xie, Xie Donglai. Xie Donglai was a very outstanding young man among the descendants of the Xie clan. He had cultivated for less than 100,000 years, and was already in the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier. He had already grasped some authority in the Xie clan. And if he could break through to the heavenly body tier, he would become an important figure in the Xie clan. The Cloud Phoenix sect wanted to form a marriage alliance with the Xie family, and the other party was this Prince Xie. Xie Donglai had accepted the invitation, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had also been sent back by her sect. In the end, Xie Donglai fell in love with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden at first sight. A few days after returning to the imperial capital, he sent someone to deliver a letter, saying that he wanted to take the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden as his concubine. For an important successor like him, it was not up to him to choose the official wife. He had to choose someone who would be helpful to the Xie family through marriage. For example, loyal subordinates, or powerful officials of equivalent strength. As a result, it was naturally impossible for the tiny Cloud Phoenix sect to become the first wife, but at least she would be a legitimate concubine. She would still have a rather high status, and from the perspective of the Cloud Phoenix sect, this was climbing the social ladder. The Cloud Phoenix sect naturally agreed happily, but how could the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden be willing? She claimed to be the widow of the Ling family, which was a declaration and a form of persistence. It was just that even though she had the strength to resist the Cloud Phoenix sect now, compared to a colossus like the Xie family, she was simply indescribably weak. Thus, she decided to go to the Two-Realm battlefield. That was the only place where the Xie clan's forces could not reach. When Kong Xiu Yuan received the letter, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden should have already arrived at the Two-Realm battlefield. Ling Han was furious. They actually wanted to force his wife to remarry? Wasn't this making him a cuckold? This Cloud Phoenix sect was really despicable. For their own benefit, they actually forced a good woman into prostitution. And Xie Donglai, who dared to steal his wife, he would not be satisfied if he did not castrate him 10 times. I want to go to the Two-Realm battlefield immediately. Ling Han made a prompt decision. The Two-Realm battlefield was a slaughterhouse of life. Every year, every month, and even every day, there were innumerable people who died in battle there. Though the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's bloodline was powerful, and she had already reached the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier, in the Two-Realm battlefield, this bit of strength of hers should not be enough. If the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was even slightly injured, he would definitely skin Xie Donglai alive later. As for the Cloud Phoenix sect, there was no need to mention it. It was fated to be flattened by him in the first place. Master, let's go too. Kong Xiu Yuan and Yong Yuan Wang hurriedly said. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You two are not cultivators, so why are you joining in the fun? Concoct pills properly. When I return, if you two still have not advanced into level 6 alchemists, just wait for a beating." The two of them screamed in pain. Advancing from level 5 to level 6 required at least tens of thousands of years of accumulation, and they were far from that level. Ling Han ignored them. Now that the conflict between the Han Lin Pavilion and the Treasure Forest Pavilion had been resolved, it did not matter even if he was not here. However, he had to keep his word. He decided to make a trip to the Treasure Forest Pavilion first, and pass the pill recipe for the Berserk Blood Spirit pill to Han Xinyan. Then, he would go to the two-realm battlefield. In any case, it would only take him a short trip. Yun Yong Yuan and Kong Xiu Yuan naturally supported Ling Han in finding their master's wife. They both nodded. On one hand, they had to protect the Han Lin Pavilion and complete the task that Ling Han had given them. They had to buy as much level 5 godly metal as possible, and on the other hand, they had to concoct pills with all their might and become level 6 alchemists. Ling Han set off alone, and did not alert his two elder brothers. He did not bring his disciple Ding Ping either. Even his 4 followers were left behind in Big Trade City. The two-realm battlefield was really too dangerous. Only the Azura Demon Emperor and the old Ginseng were in the Black Tower. For others, there was no spiritual qi in the Black Tower, so it was not suitable for cultivation. Only the reincarnation tree could allow them to comprehend Tao. However, it was different for the old Ginseng. That was because he was a godly medicine of heaven and earth, and the Black Tower also had the ability to accelerate the growth of plants. Although it was not as exaggerated for him, the benefits were still very great. Thus, when he had nothing to do, he liked to stay in the Black Tower and absorb that kind of power. Moreover, he would take root under the reincarnation tree, and he could comprehend Tao while he was at it. His progress was very fast, and he was just about to advance to the Sun-Moon tier. Of course, it was impossible for the old Ginseng to focus on cultivation. He would often come out and tease young women in Big Trade City. As long as they were slightly beautiful, there was practically no one who could escape the old Ginseng's demonic claws. Ling Han quickly arrived at the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Lin Yuqi had clearly made arrangements for him. When he appeared, he saw that the people in the shop all respectfully addressed him as Elder Ling. They were incredibly respectful. "Yo, did you miss me?" Lin Yuqi walked over with a fragrant wind. She directly stood in front of Ling Han, her perky breasts only 1 or 2 inches away from Ling Han. Ling Han looked down and said, "I'm here to find Han Xinyan. I'm here to teach her the pill recipe for the Berserk Blood Spirit pill." Lin Yuqi was infuriated. In Ling Han's eyes, was she inferior to that immature, flat-chested little girl? Calm down, calm down. She consoled herself. She waved her hand, and had someone take Ling Han to find Han Xinyan. Meanwhile, she racked her brains. How could she make a block of wood come to his senses? This is so difficult. Under the guidance of a maidservant, Ling Han entered a backyard. This was clearly a private area, and only beautiful maidservants would occasionally appear. There were no outsiders here. Reading on a cell phone was more refreshing. Chapter 1241. Young Mistress Han is the madam's distant niece. The servant girl who led the way was very nosy, and she continued to talk about Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan. In any case, the two of them were very close. Otherwise, Han Xinyan wouldn't have come to such a small city for no reason. After leading Ling Han to a courtyard, the servant girl curtsied and said, "Young Mistress Han should be meditating inside, so I don't dare to disturb her. Young master, please go and knock on the door yourself." After saying this, she turned around and left. How irresponsible. Ling Han knocked on the door, knocking. After a while, he finally heard the sound of footsteps. Creak. The door opened, and a person who was almost completely naked appeared. It was Han Xinyan. "Fuck, even she wants to tempt me." "Ah!" Han Xinyan suddenly screamed. Pung, the door immediately closed. Ling Han touched his nose. He almost bumped into the door. After a short while, the doors opened again, and Han Xinyan stormed out. Of course, She was wearing clothes this time, and she wielded a sword in her hand. She slashed at Ling Han and shouted, "How dare you!" Ling Han hurriedly dodged. This woman was indeed very talented in alchemy, but she didn't have the corresponding ability in martial art. Ling Han only shook his heaven's might slightly, and his opponent's body went limp. How could she still attack? Don't misunderstand, I'm only here to teach you the refinement method of the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill, he said with a smile. Han Xinyan paused, and slashed a few more times before sheathing her sword. She scolded, "Evil thief." Ling Han sighed and said, "I didn't do anything to you, did I? I just knocked normally, and you ran out completely naked." Han Xinyan couldn't help but blush. She had a bad habit, and that was to strip naked when studying pill recipes. Only then would she be able to gain inspiration. Furthermore, this was Lin Yuqi's inner courtyard, and there wasn't a single man here. Thus, she naturally wasn't afraid of exposing herself. However, who knew that a man would suddenly appear and strip her naked? How embarrassing! She glared fiercely at Ling Han and said, "Never mention this matter again." She was not a rude and unreasonable person and knew that Ling Han was not at fault. However, she was naturally extremely displeased. Those with small breasts also have small tolerance. Ling Han thought to himself that this woman was really flat-chested. In fact, he wouldn't be able to see anything even if she stripped naked. If she only had breasts, she could totally pass herself off as a man. "All right," he replied calmly. He was also afraid that the other party would latch onto him and say things like, "If you were naked, I would only marry you." He tossed out a book and said, "This is the pill recipe for the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. Study it on your own first. I still have some matters to attend to, so I have to leave Big Trade City for a while. If there's anything you don't understand, you can write it down and ask me when I return." Han Xinyan was infuriated. "We're both level 8 alchemists, yet you're acting like you're going to teach me? Are you treating me like a junior?" However, now that she had obtained the pill recipe for the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill, she was too embarrassed to fall out with Ling Han. Thus, she could only put the pill recipe away in displeasure. At this moment, she really didn't dare to stubbornly say that she didn't want it. Ling Han waved his hand and left the Treasure Forest Pavilion. He set out toward the border between the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire and the Blue Cloud Imperial Empire. That was where the two-realm battlefield was located. There was a connection between the Netherworld and the Immortal Realm here. The Netherworld could invade the Immortal Realm from here, and vice versa. The cloud-piercing shuttle was no longer suitable for traveling between planets. Thankfully, Ling Han had already grasped the star-plucking step. Added with the lightning technique that he had learned from the Heavenly Tribulation, his speed was astonishingly fast. A mere 12 days later, he arrived at the two-realm battlefield. Before he set out, he first refined a Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. He spent 3 days to digest the effects of the pill, and the red sun inside his body also suddenly expanded, allowing him to advance into the middle stage of the low extreme. This kind of alchemical pill was called Berserk, because its effects were indeed violent. Even though Ling Han's physique had reached the level of level 6 godly metal, his skin and flesh were still lacerated by the impact of the pill, and a few of his godly bones were even broken. No wonder. Unless one was at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, other Sun-Moon tier cultivators had to be under the care of an elite before they could ingest this pill. Otherwise, they would only be blasted to death by the violent effects of the pill. It would be too unjust to die from ingesting this pill. And after ingesting this pill, with Ling Han's penetrating ability as the Alchemy Emperor, he sensitively discovered that alchemical poison had been left in his body. If he ingested another Berserk Blood Spirit Pill, not only would it not be able to raise his cultivation level, but it would instead cause him to die from the poison. What kind of concept was a Berserk Blood Spirit Pill? It could raise a Sun-Moon tier cultivator by a sub-minor level. If it exploded in an explosive manner, what kind of destruction would it cause? It could practically rival the full power attack of a low-level heavenly body tier cultivator. Which Sun-Moon tier cultivator could withstand this kind of toxicity? Ling Han was also at his wit's end. He observed the rate at which the alchemical poison dissipated day after day, and came to the conclusion that this would probably take as long as 3 years. In other words, if he didn't have any special methods to dispel the alchemical poison in his body, he would have to wait 3 years before he could ingest a second berserk blood spirit pill. But when he thought about it again, that meant that he would need at most 50 years to reach the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier. What kind of terrifying speed was this? How long was the lifespan of Sun-Moon tier cultivators? The consummate level was 4 million years. A whole 4 million years, yet he could only use 50 years to cultivate. Wasn't this terrifying? Wasn't this fast enough? Of course, he couldn't compare to Hunyo. The level of martial art in the celestial realm was higher, and nurturing Genesis tiers was perhaps like nurturing shattering void tier cultivators in the immortal realm. Although it wasn't something that could be achieved with a wave of a hand, it probably wouldn't be that difficult, either. On the side of the immortal realm in the two-realm battlefield, a bridgehead was built, and this bridgehead was called Wolf Fong City. The purpose of Wolf Fong City's existence was to provide a resting place for the warriors battling against the Netherworld. It was a safe haven, and at the same time, it was also a stronghold. Once Wolf Fong City was lost, then the army of the Netherworld would march straight in and bring disaster to the entire Cloud Apex planet. There were only 2 imperial empires on the Cloud Apex planet, and they were the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire and the Blue Cloud Imperial Empire. Thus, the main forces here were naturally the armies of these 2 imperial empires. Additionally, all cultivators and demonic beasts that had reached the immortal level were obligated to join the two-realm battlefield. There were a few famous armies here, such as the Purple Moon Army under the command of the Purple Moon Divine Maiden, the Everlasting Wind Army under the command of the Wind Rider King, and the Arhat Army under the command of the Wide Travel Monk King. They had all established their reputation in the great battle against the creatures of the Netherworld. Coming to the two-realm battlefield, cultivators could freely choose. One was to join the official army and fight as a soldier. When they had accumulated enough merit, they could honorably retire. The second was to act alone and hunt down creatures of the Netherworld. This could similarly allow them to accumulate merit. This was the currency used in the two-realm battlefield. Though fighting against the invasion of the Netherworld was a righteous cause, they couldn't possibly make people sacrifice their lives and shed blood with just a few words. Thus, the concept of merit came into being. One could use merit to exchange for various alchemical pills, god tools, and even cultivation techniques. And once the total value of one's merit reached a certain level, one could choose to retire. As mentioned earlier, joining the two-realm battlefield and fighting against the invasion of the Netherworld was the duty of all immortal-level cultivators. Everyone had to serve in this military service. If one exceeded the time limit and did not fulfill it, they would be beheaded if they were caught. Chapter 1242. Normally, after advancing into the mountain river tier 100,000 years, one had to join the two-realm battlefield. However, some people were prodigies, and they might advance into the Sun-Moon tier after 30,000 or 40,000 years. Then, there was also a rule that within 1 million years of advancing into the Sun-Moon tier, one had to join the army to fight against enemies. Even more prodigies could advance into the heavenly body tier within 1 million years. Then they had to join the army within 1 million years. In any case, they had to serve in the army unless they were strong enough to resist the two empires. This kind of deadline was to give prodigies enough time to grow, so that they wouldn't die in vain on the two-realm battlefield. In the two-realm battlefield, the most useful thing was merit points. How to retire? By relying on merit points. Mountain River tier required 100 merit points, Sun-Moon tier required 10,000, Heavenly Body tier required 1 million, and Eternal River tier required a terrifying 100 million. Why was the difference so great? Very simple. The difficulty of obtaining merit points for cultivators of different cultivation levels was completely different. For example, killing a netherworld being in the low extreme of the Mountain River tier would only give 1 point, but killing one in the medium extreme would give 5 points, the high extreme 10 points, and the consummate level 20 points. Theoretically, a mountain river tier cultivator only had to kill 5 netherworld beings in the consummate level of the same cultivation level to successfully retire. And after reaching the sun-moon tier, the low extreme would provide 100 merit points. Moreover, the two-realm battlefield naturally didn't allow people to fish in troubled waters. If they didn't accumulate merit points for a long time, they would be punished accordingly. After understanding all this, Ling Han began to speculate in his mind. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden had joined the two-realm battlefield so early, and there was only one goal: to hide from the Xie clan. Thus, she would definitely join an official army. Otherwise, as a wandering soldier, if she encountered members of the Xie clan, it would be difficult for her to escape the fate of being forcefully captured. Then, which army would she join? Purple Moon Army. Very simple. Aside from the Purple Moon Army, the other armies were mainly male. In the world of martial art, there were naturally more male cultivators, and the proportion was not just a little large. Thus, in the two-realm battlefield there were very few females, and the armies were mainly male. Only the Purple Moon Army was different. Because the commander was a strong woman, her army was made up entirely of women. Ling Han made some inquiries, and found out that men were not qualified to join the Purple Moon Army. They only accepted women. Moreover, in order to prevent others from harassing them, the Purple Moon Army also strictly forbade men from entering their campsite. Those who violated this rule would be castrated, and those who violated this rule would be killed. Thus, there was no way that Ling Han would rashly run to the Purple Moon Army and say that he wanted to find his wife. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden would either become a widow of the Ling family or become a widow. He decided to wait outside the campsite of the Purple Moon Army. Once the Purple Moon Army moved out, he would follow them. After he found the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, he would go over to talk to her. But even if they did, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden couldn't possibly leave with him immediately. If they left the two-realm battlefield without accumulating enough merit points, they would be considered deserters. Deserters wouldn't have a good time no matter where they went. Then, since he was going to stay here for a long time, Ling Han first went to Wolfang City and registered an identity for himself. In the future, he would be able to accumulate merit points when he killed enemies. It was very simple. He would kill beings of the netherworld, store them in his spatial spirit tool, and bring them back to Wolfang City. There would naturally be people who would check and record the merit points. And because of this method, some people here would go down the wrong path. They would rob others, steal spatial spirit tools, and even kill others to keep them quiet. There are scum everywhere, Ling Han thought. He arrived at a place 50 kilometers away from the campsite of the Purple Moon Army, sat down alone, and quietly waited for the Purple Moon Army to move out. The environment here was very poor. The spiritual chi here was barren, and there was a kind of eerie feeling. Moreover, the regulations of the Great Tao had become very weak. Ling Han had tried before and he could just barely fly. It should be known that flying in the immortal realm required cultivation level of the heavenly body tier. The two realms clashed, and even the regulations of heaven and earth were affected. If this was the case here, then what about further ahead? The point of contact between the netherworld and the immortal realm was tens of thousands of kilometers away. Moreover, the further ahead one went, the greater the influence one would receive. He changed his position, yet discovered that the regulations here had become strangely strong again. To say nothing of flying, even the height he could jump was far lower than it was in his normal state. This was because the regulations of heaven and earth had not only been weakened, but had also become unbalanced. The suppression in some places had become weaker, while the suppression in other places had become stronger. Then, if one was not familiar with this kind of change, the influence would be too great. If one was not careful, they could collide into something. And in battle, the influence would naturally be even greater. "Brat, what is this place?" The old ginseng came out of the black tower to take a breath of fresh air. However, when he arrived at this place, he couldn't help but pale with fright. What kind of damned place have you brought Grandpa Ginseng to? This place was an ominous place. There were strange demonic clouds dancing in front of them, and they exuded an evil aura. Why had they come here for no reason? "Brat, you're crazy," the old ginseng said as he pointed at Ling Han. Ling Han was not angered and merely calmly said, "Come, I'm going to call Hunyo over. I'm going to cook a large pot of old ginseng soup." The old ginseng's expression instantly changed. He was really afraid of that little girl. She was definitely a true glutton and didn't mind cold or raw food. He hurriedly smiled obsequiously and said, "Brat, what kind of friendship do we have? If there's a girl, let's go together. We're brothers in this life, so there's no need for pleasantries." Ling Han only chuckled, causing the old ginseng to awkwardly retreat to the side. Ling Han simply summoned the Azura Demon Emperor as well. However, that puppet had lost an arm, causing a great deal of the formation patterns that had been engraved on it to be missing, causing its battle prowess to drop greatly. However, this was all right. Ling Han had also advanced into the Sun-Moon tier, and did not need this kind of battle prowess anymore. What he needed was the Azura Demon Emperor's understanding of the Netherworld. The more he knew about the Netherworld, the more confident he would be in battling the beings of the Netherworld in the future. Moreover, if he wanted to break into the celestial realm, he had to grasp the power of creation and destruction at the same time. Ling Han also had to enter the Netherworld and comprehend the regulations of heaven and earth there. Only now did the old ginseng know what this place was, and he instantly looked like he was about to cry. However, when he heard Ling Han mention the Purple Moon Army, this perverted old ginseng's face blossomed, and he said, "Grandpa Ginseng will go scout out the situation." As he said this, he broke into a run, his speed ridiculously fast. Needless to say, this guy had definitely gone to the female army camp to scout out information. The old ginseng had not advanced into the Sun-Moon tier yet, but his speed was extraordinarily fast. Moreover, he could travel underground, so even heavenly body tier elites might not be able to catch him. Meanwhile, Ling Han listened to the Azura Demon Emperor talk about the Netherworld. However, the Azura Demon Emperor was only in existence at the bottom of the Netherworld, so his knowledge was limited. Especially regarding the level of demon masters, he practically knew nothing. "Save me, brat, hurry and save Grandpa Ginseng." 3 days later, the old ginseng's screams could be heard. He used his divine sense to call for help, but the transmission of his voice was far slower than the speed at which he was sprinting. "Ha, hurry and come into Grandpa Rabbit's bowl." Ling Han stood up and saw that the old ginseng was currently sprinting madly, and behind him was a rabbit that was half the height of a human. One in front and one behind, their speed was astonishingly fast. If it were not for the fact that Ling Han had formed the Eye of Truth, he would definitely not be able to catch a glimpse of either figure. Rabbit? Ling Han was incredibly astonished. It was actually that rabbit from the lower realm. How had it appeared here? Chapter 1244. Where are realm spirit stones usually found? Ling Han asked. Naturally, the place where the clash between the two realms is the strongest, Rabbit replied. Then it should be 5,000 kilometers ahead, Ling Han said. If they went any further, they would be in the territory of the Netherworld. This was the headquarters of the immortal realm, and the other side was the headquarters of the Netherworld. The closer they were, the more intense the conflict there was. The beings of the two realms all wanted to obtain realm spirit stones. At the end of the day, was this a war of invasion, a war of defense, or a war of pure interests? Ling Han shook his head. He couldn't be bothered to think about it. He had the reincarnation tree, so he didn't have much need for realm spirit stones. Moreover, his goal was to find the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Everything else could be set aside. He continued to wait for the Purple Moon Army to move. As for the old ginseng and rabbit, they actually put their arms around each other's shoulders after bickering for a while. It was as if they were close friends. Ling Han couldn't accept this. Rabbit and ginseng said that they were going to search for realm spirit stones, and they soon disappeared. Ling Han didn't mind either. As he waited, he continued to derive martial arts and pill formulas. Previously, he had obtained a large pile of ancient pill formulas. Although he had already become a level 8 alchemist, the number of pill formulas he knew was pitifully small. How could he be worthy of the title of Alchemy Emperor? He had the Azura Demon Emperor stand guard outside, and Ling Han entered the Black Tower. If the Purple Moon Army moved, the Azura Demon Emperor would cause a huge commotion nearby and startle him. Peng He comprehended under the reincarnation tree for an unknown period of time. Suddenly he felt a huge tremor nearby and hurriedly exited the Black Tower. He saw the Azura Demon Emperor engaged in a fierce battle with a group of people. There were only 3 Sun-Moon tier elites in this group, and the others were all at the Mountain River tier. However, the puppet that the Azura Demon Emperor had taken control of was already severely damaged. His cultivation level was only at the Mountain River tier, and his divine sense wasn't strong enough. Moreover, there were people among these people who were skilled in divine sense attacks, and they bombarded him with attacks. If it weren't for the fact that this puppet was at the Sun-Moon tier, the Azura Demon Emperor would have died long ago. Ling Han couldn't help but feel annoyed. He leaped over and said, "Stop. Master." It was as if the Azura Demon Emperor had seen his savior, and he hurriedly charged toward Ling Han. He was about to be beaten to death, and now that Ling Han had appeared like a god, he was so moved that he was about to cry. But that group of people didn't stop. Instead, they all sneered. One of them said, "Wow, you actually dare to collude with the Netherworld's demons. How dare you?" These people actually discovered the true identity of the Azura Demon Emperor. Ling Han casually threw out a punch and forced these people back. He said, "This is my servant. What does he have to do with the Netherworld?" The Azura Demon Emperor hid behind Ling Han and used his divine sense to transmit his voice, saying, "Master, little Azura released my main body in order to keep an eye on the Purple Moon Army. However, I just so happened to be discovered by these people, and they came to kill me." He was in the form of mist, so even if he couldn't fly in the god realm, he could still stretch his body and stand at a high place to better scout for information. He didn't expect that this would ruin things. Ling Han nodded. This wasn't the Azura Demon Emperor's fault. Instead, it was to better carry out his orders. "Sir, if you don't move aside, I'll treat you as a traitor of the god realm and execute you as well," the other person threatened. "Don't waste words with him. Maybe he's a fat sheep. Just kill him. Maybe he's the descendant of some great clan, and he has a lot of treasures on him." Greed appeared on these people's faces. Ling Han came to a sudden realization and said, "You guys should be looters, right? You specialize in robbing people who move alone." These people all chuckled coldly and said, "Since you've guessed it, then die." Although Ling Han was also at the Sun-Moon tier, he was only at the middle stage of the low extreme, after all. Moreover, he was alone, while they had 3 Sun-Moon tier elites. Moreover, they had been here for many years and had also accumulated some wealth. They used their merit points to exchange for some treasures. If they really used them, they could even kill someone at the peak stage of the medium extreme. This was also one of the reasons why they dared to be so unbridled. Killing intent condensed in Ling Han's eyes. Since that was the case, there was no need for him to hold back, and he would kill them all. Together, this group of people didn't care about the rules of fighting alone. A dozen or so of them attacked Ling Han and the Azura Demon Emperor at the same time. Sabers flashed and swords flashed, and killing intent soared. Ling Han's expression darkened, and he said, "Instead of fighting the beings of the Netherworld, you're ambushing your own people here. You guys are really something." He flicked his finger, and the head of a looter instantly exploded. His divine sense was also instantly shattered, and he died completely. Damn it. These thieves were all furious. Because it was only a Mountain River tier elite that had died, they didn't feel any fear, and they still attacked Ling Han madly. Ling Han clenched his fist. He punched, and another person's head exploded, and even his divine sense was shattered. If one wanted to completely kill an immortal, they had to destroy their divine sense as well. Otherwise, the divine sense could be possessed, and if one could obtain a good body, perhaps their strength would be even greater. Heads exploded one after another, and blood soared into the sky. There were only a dozen or so thieves here, so how could they withstand Ling Han's slaughter? In the blink of an eye, there were only 3 Sun-Moon tier thieves left. However, The legs of these three people were trembling. The young man in front of them was like a god of death. He killed one with each punch, and even though they were surrounded by him, he was still able to kill them easily. This kind of strength caused them to tremble in fear. He was too powerful. Damn it! One of the thieves roared in anger. Second, third, don't be so reluctant. Use your divine talismans, or we'll die here today. He drew out a divine talisman and slapped it onto his chest. Suddenly, a crimson light radiated from his body, and boundless flames surged out, causing his aura to instantly become several times stronger. The other two also smiled viciously, and they both drew out divine talismans and slapped them onto their bodies. They had all cultivated the same cultivation technique, and were using the same type of divine talisman. They were all crimson flames soaring into the sky, and instantly possessed the strength of the peak stage of the medium extreme, or even the early stage of the high extreme. Die! The three of them pounced, wanting to kill Ling Han. Ling Han was shocked. This kind of divine talisman that could increase one's strength was very precious, but he could actually use it on these three thieves. They must have exchanged for it with merit points. No wonder so many people were still fighting here even after completing their service. Because aside from the shocking death rate, the two-realm battlefield was also a treasure land. As long as one could accumulate a large amount of merit points, they could exchange for any treasure. Using it on these three people? What a waste. Ling Han used a sliver of heaven's might. The three immediately knelt down, their bodies limp, and they actually didn't have the slightest bit of strength. They had only used divine talismans to increase their strength, but the strength of their divine sense hadn't changed at all, so how could they resist Ling Han's king-tier might that was based on heavenly tribulation? Chapter 1245. Don't kill me! The three bandits were so frightened that tears flowed from their eyes. At this critical moment, their cowardly nature was completely revealed. This was because they were only pleading for themselves and did not care about the lives of their companions. What's the point of you living? Asked Ling Han indifferently. Master, let little Azura do it. The Azura demon emperor said, holding his breath. He had almost been killed by this group of people just then, so he naturally wanted to take revenge with his own hands. He was brimming with murderous intent. He was originally a demon from the netherworld, so killing a few people was not a burden to him at all. The three bandits cried out in alarm. Spare me! I have an ancient map that points to the location of an ancient treasury, said one of the bandits. What? The other two cried out in alarm. Didn't you say that the treasure map was lost? So you took it all for yourself. They rebuked one after another, filled with anger. This was an internal strife. The Azura demon emperor observed his expression, and knew that Ling Han's interest had been piqued. He immediately took advantage of Ling Han's power, and said, What treasure map? Hand it over immediately. If I hand it over, can you spare my life? The man asked cautiously. Path Azura demon emperor smashed another bandit's head with a punch, and then threatened, Do you have the right to bargain? That person was so scared that his face turned green. He hurriedly said, Don't kill me. I'll bring you to the treasure map right now. You didn't bring it with you? The Azura demon emperor asked. That person hurriedly shook his head. Although they were companions, they did not trust each other. How could he possibly place the treasure map in his spatial spirit artifact? They could rob others, but naturally, they could also be robbed by others. Absolutely precious items could not be carried by them, otherwise, how could they have the right to bargain? If their spatial spirit tools were taken away, they would all be finished. The Azura demon emperor turned to look at Ling Han, and when he saw Ling Han's indifferent expression, he was instantly emboldened. He charged toward the other bandit. The bandit's head was smashed into smithereens, and blood splattered all over the remaining bandit's face. He was so scared that he almost wet his pants. Although they usually killed people ruthlessly, when such a thing happened to him, his legs immediately turned to jelly. The Azura demon emperor escorted the robber, while Ling Han walked behind him. With the robber leading the way, they arrived at a small mountain valley. The robber moved a boulder aside, and underneath it was a ring that was wedged in a crack of the boulder. If he hadn't found it himself, it would have been almost impossible to find the ring. The Azura Demon Emperor snatched the ring away before respectfully handing it over to Ling Han, a fawning expression on his face. Ling Han accepted it and infused his divine sense into it. He saw that there were indeed many things inside. There were true origin stones, a few cultivation techniques, a few pieces of godly metal, and finally, a map. He took it out and asked, "Where did this treasure map come from?" "I don't know. I only found this map when I was robbing a group of people. That's why I kept it," said the robber. "Young master, can I leave now?" "Leave your sister." The Azura Demon Emperor immediately threw out a punch. The last robber was also killed. Ling Han didn't have the slightest bit of sympathy. This group of people specialized in robbing the people here, and their behavior was very hateful. They should have clenched their fists and fought, but they were harming their own people, which was incredibly annoying. "Where is this place?" Ling Han looked at the map. The area in the middle was circled with a red pen. It should be the location of the treasure, but the whole terrain was very unfamiliar. Speaking of treasure, I still have a set of coordinates that was obtained in the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms. Ling Han remembered. Those 12 Heaven Mystery Realms were built by the 12 generals under the Heavenly River King. As long as one inherited a palace, they would be able to obtain the coordinates of that immortal realm. The supreme inheritance of the Heavenly River King was hidden there. Previously, Ling Han had always been on the Joint Peace Planet, so he naturally couldn't search for these coordinates, but now that he had come to the Cloud Apex Planet, he could search for it. However, who is the Heavenly River King? The secret techniques I obtained in the Mystery Realm, whether it's the 9 Dragons Tyrant Body Art or the Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow, are all supreme techniques, at least for now. From this, it can be seen that the inheritance of the Heavenly River King is at least at the Heavenly Body tier. Oh, right, I also obtained an egg in that Mystery Realm. With a thought from Ling Han, an egg immediately appeared in front of him. He had obtained this from the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms, and then kept it in the Black Tower. Because it hadn't changed, he had forgotten about its existence. There's vitality, which means it can still hatch. But how long will it take? This is the descendant of the Azure Flame Eagle, so logically, it shouldn't have not hatched after so long. Could it be because it was kept in the Black Tower? After all, though the space in the Black Tower can accommodate living beings, it lacks the necessary regulations of heaven and earth, so it can't be considered a true world. Moreover, it was left under the reincarnation tree all this time, and seems to have caused this egg to change mysteriously. Is this hatched Azure Flame Eagle still an Azure Flame Eagle? Why don't I just eat it? This thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, but he still decided to keep this egg. Perhaps if he took it out and exposed it to more sunlight, it should be able to hatch. He left the egg just like that, while he himself sat on the rock and began to think. Breaking open a small world should be possible at the Sun-Moon tier, but if I want to enter a small world, this should be very difficult, because the regulations don't allow it. I have to suppress my own cultivation level, or sever my own cultivation level. Apart from those people from the celestial realm, when their strength reaches a certain level, they can ignore the regulations of a small world. That guy, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, can't also be from the celestial realm, right? The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire wanted him to get some true dragon horn, Heavenly Phoenix Feather. Those were all saint-level beings, and from the tone of the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, it seemed that he was very disdainful. Then, if he was a great elite from the celestial realm, then this was easy to understand. What kind of place is the lower realm? Why did it attract so many monsters? Ling Han felt his head swell. The Azura Demon Emperor had said that the lower realm had already opened the sky once before, and then for some unknown reason, it had returned to become a small world, which was why Ling Han had opened the sky a second time. Perhaps I have to wait until I enter into the celestial realm to be qualified to understand this. At least I can be certain that Genesis tiers can't separate a piece of land from the immortal realm and transform it into a small world. Only those who have grasped the power of creation and destruction can do this. I have obtained the Black Tower, and it seems that I have also inherited a huge danger. Ling Han shook his head and planned to put away the egg, return to his original place, and continue to wait for the Purple Moon Army to move out. Shwa. Right at this moment, a flash of sword light slashed toward Ling Han, its might extremely terrifying, as if the heavens were collapsing. Die, evil thief! Chapter 1246. This sword was too fast. Even though the sword had already pierced through the air, the sound had yet to reach its destination. Ling Han clenched his fist and smashed it into the sword light. Instantly, the resplendent sword light shattered and a figure was forced back. However, that person had some skill. With a somersault, he dissipated the majority of Ling Han's punch's power and landed stably on the ground. It was a woman who looked to be in her 20s. She was quite beautiful, but her face was filled with arrogance. She was either a young miss or a pampered daughter of some sect who had been spoiled. Behind her, there were 7 other people quickly walking over. They were all men, but only one was a white-haired old man. The other 6 were all youths who exuded a heroic spirit. Junior apprentice sister. The 6 youths immediately ran over and surrounded the young beauty, their expressions filled with concern. Junior apprentice sister, are you all right? That fellow didn't injure you, did he? Damn it, he actually dared to touch my junior apprentice sister. These people were concerned for the beauty while glaring at Ling Han, as if they wanted to kill him with their gazes. They completely ignored the fact that it was the woman who had attacked first. Ling Han couldn't help but find it funny. This woman had inexplicably attacked him, and he had only been defending himself. Why did it seem like he had done something unforgivable? He shook his head. Don't you think you owe me an explanation and an apology? An explanation. An apology. Those people all sneered. He had injured their junior apprentice sister, and now he wanted them to explain and apologize? Had his head been kicked by a donkey? He's just a mere robber. Everyone has the right to kill him, but he still wants an explanation and an apology? How laughable, said one of the youths. Hearing that, Ling Han's anger actually subsided a bit. There really wasn't any need to follow any rules when attacking a robber. Otherwise, he would only be throwing his life away. But which eye of yours saw that he looked like a robber? You think I'm a looter? Ling Han shook his head. Your eyes are really bad. I need to treat them. You scoundrel, the map in your hand belongs to one of my senior brothers. If you weren't a looter, how could it have ended up in your hands? That woman had already caught her breath and immediately rebuked Ling Han. What a joke! Ling Han snorted. Can't I just kill the looters and take it from them? Hee hee, young man, since that's the case, please return the map to us. The only old man spoke. His voice was low and deep, carrying with it a powerful aura. He was at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, so he naturally didn't take Ling Han seriously. Ling Han laughed loudly in anger and said, let's not talk about whether this map originally belonged to you, but since it was obtained by me, if you want to take it back, you should at least lower your attitude a little, right? I'm not your slave, but you're acting all high and mighty. What, do I owe you anything? Bullshit, a young man rebuked. This is originally ours, so shouldn't you return it to us? Ling Han scoffed. It's yours. This map may have existed for tens of millions of years, and is an antique. Its true owner died long ago, so how can you say it's yours? At most, you just snatched it from somewhere. There's no need to be so self-righteous. Young man, are you asking for trouble? The old man humphed. Seventh uncle, don't waste words with this kind of person. Capture him. The woman said. Among those present, only she dared to speak like this. Who asked her to be favored? The old man thought for a moment, and said, fine, try not to hurt anyone. The 7 young men all smirked coldly. Try not to hurt anyone, and that was fine even if they did. The strength of this group was much stronger than the previous looters. Aside from the old man who was at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, the 7 of them had also advanced into the Sun-Moon tier. Their strength ranged from the early stage of the low extreme to the peak stage, but none of them had advanced into the medium extreme. True, If they didn't have some strength, how would they dare to search for those looters? That being the case, this treasure map really did have some value. With a thought, Ling Han stored the treasure map and the egg into the Black Tower. Then, he said coldly, though you aren't looters, you aren't much better. I'll give you one last warning. Apologize to me, or you can pray for your own good. How laughable, you still dare to threaten us at this time. Just kill him. In any case, the spatial spirit tool can't run away. That's right, kill him. We are disciples of the Heaven's Sword Palace. The 7 people all said, Heaven's Sword Palace. Ling Han's killing intent instantly blazed. He hadn't gone to find trouble with the 5 sects, and he had already encountered them. They really had the demeanor of the 5 sects, so arrogant. He calmly said, Aren't you afraid that I have a backer that can destroy the Heaven's Sword Palace with a flip of my hand? Someone with a real backer wouldn't let you run around alone. There must be a protector protecting you in secret, a young man said with a scoff. Did he think they were idiots? They were very clear who they could offend and who they couldn't. Moreover, let me tell you one more thing, another young man said. All those who come from great clans and forces have a clear mark on them. He raised his sleeve, and there was a sword embroidered on it. It was very small, and if one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't notice it. So that's how it is. Ling Han nodded and said, Thank you for this information, and as a reward for you, I will send you on your way. He wanted to topple the 5 sects, but he didn't have the thought of killing everyone because he thought that no matter how bad a sect was, there could still be people with righteous hearts. Thus, he only planned to disband the 5 sects, kill the higher-ups, and let the others leave. But these people in front of him, they made him want to kill. What shameless boasting! The 7 people all smirked coldly. Though they were young, which one of them hadn't cultivated for 200,000 or 300,000 years. Their hands were stained with who knew how much blood, so how could they be soft-hearted? The treasure map is very important, so we definitely can't leave anyone alive. The 7 people attacked, showing no mercy. Ling Han humphed coldly, and with a flick of his finger, sword chi rained down on the 7 people. He hadn't killed them before not because he was soft-hearted, but because he didn't have the habit of killing indiscriminately. But now that these people wanted to seek death, he naturally didn't mind sending them on their way. Not good. The old man instantly paled when he saw Ling Han attack. This was too terrifying. It had only been a few flick of his finger, but the battle prowess that Ling Han had erupted with was almost on par with his. One had to realize that Ling Han was already in the middle stage of the low extreme, and his power could surpass 6 stars. Thus, his battle prowess was actually at the peak stage of the medium extreme. How terrifying was this? Poo, pew, pew. The 7 people's heads exploded from the rain of swords at the same time, and none of them had a complete corpse. Though the old man had moved, he was still a step too late. He could only watch as his 7 juniors were slaughtered. These were prodigies that the sect had nurtured for 100,000 or 200,000 years. The old man's heart was dripping with blood. He glared fiercely at Ling Han. Brat, I'm going to cut off your flesh piece by piece and feed it to the dogs. Chapter 1248. Old man, can we go in peace now? Ling Han smiled. The elder from the Heaven's Sword Palace glared at Ling Han. Origin power surged out from his severed arm and took the shape of a hand. To a powerful immortal spirit, even if all 4 of his limbs were severed, he would not completely lose his ability to fight. However, he no longer had the courage to fight. He wanted to immediately return to the Heaven's Sword Palace and report to the true higher-ups that Ling Han had appeared here. This was far too frightening. This brat was as freakish as a monster. If he was given a few more years, wouldn't he reach the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier? In fact, he might even reach the Heavenly Body tier. At that time, so what if the 5 sects joined forces? Who would be a match for him? Right now, there were still many experts in the 5 sects, and the most powerful ones even had battle prowess surpassing 4 stars. Any one of them could easily kill this brat. His life was very precious, and he could not die here. The old man said to himself. He would never admit that he was afraid of death. Instead, he placed his life where it was most needed. However, even when he was at his peak, he was no match for Ling Han. Now that he had lost both of his arms, his battle prowess had been greatly reduced, and he still wanted to escape. Even though he was an elite of the Heaven Sword Palace, he was limited to the level of the Heaven Sword Palace, and he really did not have any trump cards on him. He had spent his entire life's savings on that Tier 7 God artifact. Unfortunately, this God artifact could not protect him. The old man was going all out. He wanted to carve out a path of blood. As long as he could escape into Wolf Fong City, Ling Han would definitely not dare to attack him again. No matter what kind of grudges they had, Wolf Fong City forbade the beings of the immortal world from killing each other. Keep your gun pointed at the outside world. Ling Han sneered. Still trying to escape? He slashed out with his sword, and the divine demon sword slashed out tens of thousands of sword projections. This was not the mysterious 3,000, but rather the might of the divine demon sword itself. If this were not the case, how could it be called the future divine metal? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword shadows were like flames, startling the 9 heavens. The old man's rank 7 divine artifact danced on its own, covering the old man's retreat and fighting for a chance to escape. This was the difference between divine artifacts and weapons. They either had a weapon spirit or a martial art will, which was equivalent to having self-awareness. Ling Han unleashed his divine demon sword to defend himself. Meanwhile, he summoned his annihilating dragon star arrow. Shoo! The arrow shot out as fast as lightning. Puff blood blossomed from the old man's back. He fell to the ground and let out a shrill cry. The arrow had injured him quite badly. Meanwhile, the divine demon sword unleashed tens of thousands of sword projections, forcefully suppressing the level 7 god tool. It was truly hard to imagine that a tier 5 divine tool could suppress a tier 7 divine tool. This completely violated the laws of martial art. However, who asked the material of the divine demon sword to be so freakish? Ling Han dashed out and used his finger as a sword. The Thunderbolt sword art was unleashed, and his killing intent was overflowing. His physique was equivalent to level 6 godly metal. Thus, the attack that he executed with his finger as a sword was similarly not to be underestimated. It was completely no weaker than a level 6 god tool. The old man still wanted to make a final struggle, but his heart was pierced by thousands of sword chi, and his body was forcibly split into 2. However, deities would not die so easily. Once their divine souls left their bodies, they had to fly away. Theoretically speaking, without a physical body, the divine soul was like rootless duckweed. It would quickly weaken and finally die. However, the stronger one was, the slower the speed of weakening would be. Those at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier could at least last for a few months, which was enough time for him to find a fresh corpse, or simply replace a living person and possess them. Humph! However, Ling Han flicked his finger lightly, and a flash of sword chi caught up. Pa! The old man's divine soul was instantly shattered, and he completely died. The elder's divine sword immediately wailed in anguish. It was just about to fly into the sky and flee, yet it was slashed several hundred times by the divine demon sword. The martial intent within it was forcefully destroyed, and it turned into an ordinary sword. Without the martial art intent, a god tool was no longer a god tool, but only a sharp weapon. Ling Han put this sword away. In the future, he could let the divine demon sword devour it, so he naturally would not waste it. I never thought that I would encounter the 5 sects under such circumstances. However, they lost this treasure map, and actually specially sent people to search for it, so it's not ordinary. Ling Han took out the treasure map again. However, his understanding of the Cloud Apex planet was extremely pitiful, and he could not study the location of that place no matter what. That's true. Even the 5 sects have not figured it out. Otherwise, why would they run around with the treasure map? They must have already gone to retrieve the treasure. Let's see. If we happen to encounter it, we can take it. Otherwise, there's no need to waste time. Ling Han returned to his original place and continued to wait for the Purple Moon Army to move out. At the same time, he released that egg, letting it continue to bask in the sun to see if it could speed up its growth. A few days later, Rabbit and the old ginseng returned, both looking disheveled. It turned out that they had encountered elites from the netherworld. If it were not for the fact that they could both escape underground, they would definitely have been made into rabbit meat and old ginseng soup. Little Han, hurry up and leave with Uncle Rabbit. Let's settle this grudge. Rabbit pulled Ling Han. Right. Grandpa Ginseng has never suffered such a loss in his entire life. I can't just let it go like this. That one-eyed dragon sword almost sliced off Grandpa Ginseng's manhood. I need a 20-year-old doo-doo to calm my nerves. The old ginseng took out a pink doo-doo and took a deep breath. Instantly he felt refreshed. Pa, Ling Han sent him flying with a kick. How could there be such a wretched spirit of the 5 elements? In comparison, the rock golem was practically a model of morality. I don't have time, Ling Han refused. Since you guys are so free, hurry up and help me find out when the Purple Moon Army will move out. Brat, as expected of Grandpa Ginseng's good friend. The old ginseng ran back, looking like a kindred spirit. However, you're much more greedy than Grandpa Ginseng. You actually want to capture their entire army in one fell swoop. Even Grandpa Ginseng can't help but admire you. Ling Han chuckled and gave him another kick. There was a pained cry, and the old ginseng was kicked into the sky. Brat, are you done? The voice became more and more distant, and the old ginseng turned into a small star. The world finally became peaceful. Ling Han suddenly stood up. He saw that 100 kilometers away, a group of people was currently emerging from the main camp of the Purple Moon Army. With his eyesight, he could still clearly see them from 100 kilometers away. They were so far away because there was an Eternal River Tier elite standing guard in the Purple Moon Army. Their perception would definitely be incredibly powerful. He didn't dare to get too close. Otherwise, if an Eternal River Tier elite thought that he was deliberately spying on them, he would really be killed. Although everyone was united against outsiders, who dared to say anything when an Eternal River Tier elite moved out. It had been proven time and time again that strength was king in this world. However, the Purple Moon Army finally moved out, although it was only a small army. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth. Like this, he could clearly see everyone. There were only 100 people in this army, and Ling Han had seen them from the beginning to the end. When his eyes swept over 1/3 of the army, his eyes suddenly fixed on one person, and an excited expression appeared on his face. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, that you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.